I'll put this on this side because it's easier. All right. Ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's begin with our council work session.
You want to gavel
Call
us
it to
in?
order. Yeah, gavels.
Call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Mayor. For those of you that haven't been here before, the restrooms are behind those double doors, behind the fire chief. We have masks. If you want a mask, they're not required as of yet, so hopefully we don't have to require them, but we have them available if you want. If anyone wants to speak at public comment, there's a sign-up sheet. We do not have any public hearings tonight. We just have the one public comment up here at the beginning of the meeting, so the sign-up sheet is over here. So with that, hopefully. Well. Yep. We'll go over the vision statement for the city. That Belmont will be a vibrant, multi-generational community that incorporates small-town charm and heritage with an entrepreneurial spirit. And I'll go over the consent agenda items, and then we'll go over the regular agenda when we start the regular meeting. So we have 3 sets of minutes. The approval of the regular meeting minutes from August the 2nd, and then there are closed session minutes from the end of that meeting that are on the blue paper, so please review that if you haven't already. And then pass those down to the clerk or the attorney when we're finished with that area. Item 3 on the consent agenda is the workshop meeting minutes from August the 16th. Item 4 on the consent agenda is approval of an interlocal agreement with Gaston County for collection of our property taxes. We've had a longstanding agreement with Gaston County to collect our property taxes. This is what we discussed during the budget workshop. They were increasing the fee that they charge us to do that. So that new fee is in this agreement. It's still cheaper to go through the county than it would be to do this in-house, and they do provide a really good service for us with property tax collection. This would be a 2-year agreement, and then it would automatically renew after the 2 years. The fee goes up again next year slightly, and then they will renegotiate the fee with the municipalities in 2023, which is the revow year. Mm-hmm. At least I hope they will negotiate. Ow. They did not negotiate this year. Item 5 is approval of a resolution authorizing the city to apply for a Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan. And this is part of our interlocal agreement with the city of Charlotte for our wastewater regionalization project. Part of that interlocal agreement that was approved several years ago was that we would apply for the state revolving fund loan, which is a very low interest rate and certainly below market rate. This is what Mount Holly has done with their part of their same project with Charlotte Water. So part of that application process is that we have this resolution authorizing the city to apply for that funding from the state. Item 6 on the consent agenda is approval of a reimbursement resolution for the Belmont Recreation Center. This is a follow-up from your workshop a few weeks ago when we talked about the guaranteed maximum price for the rec center. And because we had not completed our audits in time to get on the October Local Government Commission meeting agenda, we agreed to cash flow the project until we can get these audits completed and get on that agenda. And as I mentioned to you last week, we should be on schedule to get that completed by the end of December, so we should make that January LGC meeting. The reason we have to do the reimbursement resolution is that we'll cash flow the project until we get the financing in place, and then reimburse ourselves with the loan proceeds. So it's no net out of pocket for us. We'll get reimbursed. But with the tax law, we have to make sure that we have this reimbursement resolution in place in order to legally reimburse ourselves for it. That'll come up again later in the regular meeting, so just remember that. Item 7, actually, there's 2 parts to item 7. The first is approval of a resolution authorizing the donation of a surplus police department vehicle to the Cherryville Police Department. We're authorized to donate property to other local governments through this process and the statutes. We have to do it through resolution. The second part is your normal declaration of surplus property for 2 other police vehicles that we don't need. So those will just be declared surplus if you approve this item on the consent agenda. and we will offer those for sale on gov deals like we normally do with surplus properties. Item 8 on the consent agenda is approval of an ordinance authorizing the sale, possession, and consumption of alcoholic beverages and the closure of South Main Street for BooFest. This is what we did in 2019. Of course, we didn't have BooFest last year, but BooFest will be on October the 23rd in Stowe Park and on South Main Street. Item 9, similarly, is approval of an ordinance authorizing the sale, possession, and consumption of alcoholic beverages for the Moonlight on Main series of events that will be in Stowe Park on October the 22nd, 24th, 28th through 31st, and November 4th through 7th. That's the 3 weekends of events for the Moonlight on Main. And then finally, the last item, item 10 on the consent agenda, is approval of a maintenance contract with Otis Elevators for the new elevator here in the City Works building. The Otis folks installed the Otis elevator. They've worked on it for the past year, just doing regular maintenance. So they have a 10-year maintenance agreement with us. If you approve that, Bill Carroll, our Public Works Director, has been working with Otis, and they've been very responsive. We did price this around because we do have an elevator in the water treatment plant tower, and this was similar in pricing, and we were satisfied with using Otis for maintaining the elevator that they installed over the next 10 years. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Anybody have any questions for Adrian on the consent agenda?
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
I have a question about the police vehicle because that's unusual. As a taxpayer, I'm going to question why we're donating that for $1 as opposed to the gov deals that we usually do. So how do you juggle that?
So I would ask Chief Hawkins to come up. He's had conversations with the Cherville Police Department, but the statutes do authorize to do this, and we did it with, we donated a vehicle to Cherville, I believe in 2018 or 2019, something like that. But if you could give a little background on the request from Cherville.
This actually is something that's not unusual. Belmont Police Department's benefited from such a program. When I began here and we started transitioning our 800 megahertz radios, we had to get stuff from other agencies until we could get our equipment to make that happen. The situation that they've been involved in, they have some vehicles that went out of service, crashes, just mechanical issues. The problem is right now, what we're all facing, and I hope not, but we could be facing this next year ourselves. You cannot get a car. We ordered cars last year. We were told we would get them in the fourth quarter of 2022. Yeah. So we have a lot of issues going on with getting equipment, things, but this was one of the ones that was kind of a hardship they had requested. I don't know all the circumstances that it was requested. It's something I've benefited from before at other agencies and getting vehicles donated from other county entities. So it's just kind of being neighborly and helping them out. So I hope that we're not in a situation like that ourselves, but that's kind of some of the background. They need a car and they asked if we have one. So, and when we are surplusing the cars, it's generally because we need to get them out of service because they have a lot of mechanical issues and it's not cost effective for us to keep the vehicle anymore.
So how much benefit is it going to be to them then?
Well, if you get a car and you pay $1 for it and you have to put a few $1,000s into it or something, it may be worth it to them to get them over the hump till they can get another car. For us to continue to keep putting money into it is just not cost effective anymore. Because if you look at a vehicle and it has 100,000 miles on it, you have to figure there's way more idling miles and there's stop and go in a smaller city like Belmont. So there's a lot of wear and tear that's on that vehicle. So you begin putting a lot of money into maintenance issues for those vehicles.
Okay.
How much could we generally expect to get for a car like this through gov deals?
We've seen them go from $200 to maybe $3,000 or $4,000. Just depends on what the need.
Yeah.
If some of them are in much better shape. Now the van that's going, we may have to. The old van that's in there as well, we may have to pay someone to take it.
Chief, let me ask you, if we're going to have a hard time possibly getting vehicles, is it wise to keep any of these vehicles and hold them in reserve?
We do. We have a few that's what we call our spare, our pool vehicles.
Okay.
So we have some of those.
All right, I mean, I'm not opposed to helping someone out if this is a hardship. I mean, otherwise I would say, auction the vehicle off. Because, I mean, it's relatively low mileage, 66,000. But it is an older car. I guess the one question, again, I don't have any problem with this because it is a hardship. If it wasn't, then what I would say is we're taking the tax burden off the citizens of Cherryville and putting it on the citizens of Belmont. Normally I would like to recoup something, for all of our assets if possible. But from what you're saying, is they're in a position where they're not able to get a vehicle and they're down patrol vehicles and can't adequately patrol?
I'm not going to get into all their details. They made a request to us based on that they needed a vehicle, and I know that they had some issues and crashed vehicles. I don't know all their infrastructure and all those things. I just know the request was made. And this is something that I could tell you, it happens countywide. We've been the recipient of it here in Belmont with thousands upon thousands of dollars of equipment that was loaned to us to get us over the hump. So it's what we do for each other to help each other.
It's a good gesture.
Like I said, I hope we don't need it next year, but we could find ourselves. I was explaining to Adrian earlier, if we were out on the interstate and an 18-wheeler took out 3 of our vehicles, we're going to be borrowing vehicles from someone, or we're not going to have enough vehicles at some point. So we could find ourselves in a similar situation. So I hope not, but so that's what we try to do is help each other, and it's just a request. That's why we put it up before the council. It's good questions. Obviously, we want to make money back, invest it back into our tax base, but I did want the council to understand that we have been helped out by other agencies in the past as well.
If I can analogize to the law, a lot of times somebody asks for an extension or, extended deadline or whatever, and, it's sort of out of order, but you realize that, well, next time it could be me that needs an extension, and I'd certainly want them to give it to me. So you realize that it could be you on the opposite end the next time, and you
That's right.
treat other people like you'd hope to be treated.
And I take other agencies' requests in good faith that they needed or they wouldn't ask for it. I wasn't being smart about the infrastructure part. I don't know. They made the request, said that they were down vehicles, they needed vehicles. So if we told them we go through our process, obviously our ordinance and the law allows it to assist.
Yeah.
Appreciate your consideration.
Okay. Any other questions?
Not about this item.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
I did, however, have a couple questions on the interlocal tax collection agreement. I mentioned this to you, Adrian, but I think it would be better if Section C1 made it clear that the fee is 6.675% of what a total collected levy this year, and the fee for next year is 0.85% of the total collected levy for next year. Because right now it just says 0.675% and 0.85%, and it's not clear percent of what. And then I don't know, like I also mentioned that Section D1 states that the county shall provide the city weekly reports of revenues collected and transferred to the city's bank account within 3 days of such transfer. But Section A4A says that the transfers are to be made daily. So it was a little unclear to me as to when these weekly reports were supposed to be issued.
They do transfer money into our account daily, and they send us an email with a notice of the electronic funds transfer via email. I don't know about the weekly reports.
Okay.
I haven't seen those, but I do see those. And it's not necessarily a daily email, so it could be that the email that we get is the weekly report. I can clarify from the county.
I think the other thing's more important, just
Yes.
just clarifying what the fee actually is.
Yes.
So I'll let that be clarified.
I'll let the county know that we wanted to change their agreement because they didn't include that very important clause in there.
That was it.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Well, we've got to go into public. We got to end the work session and then we'll approve the consent agenda during the regular meeting.
All right, let's end the work session. We've already gone through the consent agenda, so we have to do the,
So are we going to call the regular
call a
meeting to order?
Yeah, and then we have to do the set the agenda.
I'll move to set the agenda.
Okay? All in favor, say aye.
We need a second.
I'll second.
Okay? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. And we're gonna ask Richard Boyce to do the invocation for us, and Martha is gonna do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. O Lord, in an often confusing and dangerous world, we give you thanks for this town and this safe place to gather. We especially thank you for the deep privilege of being citizens in this country and this opportunity to exercise our freedoms and our rights as residents in this place. Oh Lord, looking back over the past weeks, we continue to pray for those who are on the front lines for our protection. We especially remember the families of the 13 Marines who died at Kabul airport, helping our soldiers, our citizens, and our friends out of that beleaguered country. We pray for victims, Lord, of floods and fires all over this country, and pray that we might continue to make our communities safe for all our residents. We pray for victims of the COVID virus and ask that we would continue to be good stewards not only of our own health, but the health of our vulnerable neighbors. Now, Lord, we pray for your Spirit as we seek to do business for the sake of this town. Help us, O Lord, to show our love for you, and especially our love for our neighbors, all of our neighbors, as we seek to make this town a town that you dream of, and a town we can be proud of, not only now, but into your future. Grant us your wisdom, your Spirit, and your guidance. For I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Anybody signed up for public comment?
So as we're getting a public comment, would now be an appropriate time to move to approve the consent agenda?
Yes.
Yes,
All right, let's have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
so moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Very good. All right, we got public comment on the agenda. So Richard Boyce has signed up. State your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes to speak with this
Still got that same
high-tech
time
timepiece.
All right, Richard Boyce, 112 Dory Drive. Mr. Mayor, City Council, Mr. Manager, staff, and fellow citizens. Way back when I was mayor, I used to dream that one day I would wake up and get a phone call early, which I sometimes did, but I dreamed this phone call might be a citizen of Belmont calling me up and saying, Mr. Mayor, I just got up and turned on my water faucet and had one of the best glasses of water I've ever drunk. That call never happened. But I'm here to announce some good news and to thank y'all as a citizen of this town. A couple of weeks ago, I came home from work and saw a little notice hanging on my doorknob. I thought it was a solicitation, but I took it down and it was a notice from our water department informing me that I might have a leak in my line, which I was completely unaware of. I called the city works department at 8 p.m. and within 15 minutes, Wesley showed up in my front yard. Sadly, Wesley informed me that the leak was on my side of the meter rather than the city side of the meter. But Wesley also gave me the name of a plumber and said there's a way of fixing this line, perhaps where you won't have to dig up your whole yard. Within 3 days, I had a plumber out. They laid the new water line inside my old water line, and I've got running water. I'm proud to say that I was at least part of getting the new meters on our system. Jerry's already informed me I could have known I had a leak before I got a notice if I'd gone on the website, which I did not. But I want to thank you all for your stewardship
Sure.
of this town's resources and for your stewardship of folks like Wesley who show up when called and do what they're asked. I'm just grateful, and you should be proud of these basic things that a lot of citizens take for granted, but I know y'all don't. And I want to thank you for remaining good stewards of this town's resources.
We appreciate
That's all
that.
I got to say.
Yeah, and we're very blessed in this community.
We
having
are.
people that work for us.
Thank you,
you.
staff. Yeah.
Next person we have signed up to speak is Eileen Forrester.
My name is Eileen Forrester. I live at 713 South Main Street. This is Talia. She didn't get to sign up, but I'm gonna only take a few seconds. It's about the dog park proposal. We're really excited at the thought of a dog park, and we think that the area that we have chosen on 12th and Catawba is a great, great spot, and we really hope that you guys choose that for our new dog park. There's a lot of new residents here. Some of them have 4 legs, so we'd love for them to have a place to kind of run and frolic and play. So please pass that area. It's going to be great for the River District. And I've never been here to a meeting before, so this is very exciting for me. So thank you all for everything you do. And yay, thank you.
Good, thank you.
I don't know if I'm allowed, but yeah, I just very excited to have a dog park in the area if we can have one. And I know that a lot of people would be really happy to bring their dogs there and be a great asset to the area. So thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, Talia. All right. Next, we have Amy Posava.
Prasad.
Yeah, I got it.
Handwriting needs a little work. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Amy Bossard. I reside at 218 Plane Tree Drive in Belmont. I am a volunteer with the Design Committee and part of the joint committee between the Design Committee and the Park and Rec Citizens Advisory Board to support the dog park. I'm also a dog parent. I'm here this evening to ask for your vote of approval of the proposed dog park site at Catawba and 12th Street. In my opinion, this is a really impressive piece of property for the dog park. It's large. It's going to have plenty of room for both large and small dogs. It's going to be great for our residents and for our guests too. We're going to want to find another reason. People will find another reason to come to Belmont to bring their dogs to the park. So again, I ask for your vote of approval for the proposed dog park site, and thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Okay. Okay. Next, we have signed up to speak George Klein.
George Klein, I live at 220 Seven Oaks Landing out in South Shore, the other part of Belmont that nobody ever comes out to. But we're pretty large, believe it or not. I am the chairman of the HOA advisory committee we have out there. You know, and I think most of you may not know, but when we're finished, we're going to have about 856 homes out there. And it's going to be a big area for, and we need for Belmont to recognize us out there, that we are out there also. I think if you look at the amount of taxes we pay out there, it comes to, when everything's said and done, it's going to be about $5.1 million going to add to your tax base. And, you know, other than trash pickup, we really don't have that much out there from the city, other than the police to come through every now and then. So that's one thing. The other thing, your water, the way you do water. If you're delinquent on your water bill, I had a neighbor that just got out of major surgery. He paid his water bill, he thought, and he paid $237.67. His water bill was $273.67. He transposed two numbers there. So he was $36 short. They shut his water off one afternoon. No notice, nothing going on. He didn't even know. He called me. He just came out of the hospital, got a catheter, everything else. And he goes, how do I get this done? So we're looking around. So we go out to the water meter. The water meter is shut off. So yes, I turned it back on for him. I said, did you pay your bill? He said, yes, I paid my bill. And so I turned it back on for him. So tampering was there, if you want to say that. There was no note on the water bill. There's no note on the door. I know it says in the rules that you will get you will get a notice of delinquency on your next bill. Well, that's awful late, because this is on like the 25th, 26th. They shut off his water. The bill doesn't come for a couple more, about another week and a half. So how is he supposed to know he's delinquent until he gets that? How does he know they shut his water off? He tried to call up here, and you know, it says on the website that if you got questions, you know, call the staff. But it says, and listed below, and it says there's nothing listed below. That's what it says. It says, sorry, no content could be found. So there's no, you know, he called the number, nobody called him back. He's getting ready to call him a plumber. Something's wrong with his water. So you tell me when I run out, sir. But it's one of those deals that I think y'all really need to look at. The $100 tampering fee, because there was no notification at all that his water was going to be turned off. And this is a guy that lives in an $850,000 home. It's not like he's not going to pay his water bill, but they turned it off. And he just came home from the hospital. What does he do? But it was turned off that afternoon. It would work in the morning, but on the afternoon. But nobody left a note to let him know. Adrian and I have talked about this. I've talked to Jim about it. I have a real problem with this and the way these your billing and collections. You got lots of different dates on there. Pay it by 5 o'clock on the 15th, or you're going to get a $15 fine. On the website it says pay by the 21st of each month, or you're going to get a $50 fine. Okay,
That's
sorry.
time.
So, but you see my point.
Thank you, George.
All right, thanks.
Okay,
So is that the last public comment?
that's the last public comment we have, yeah.
Well, Adrian, I know we don't usually, you know, the typical practice is that after the public comment, we can discuss, and I believe you mentioned in your report that, well, one, there was a weakness in our new policy as this unique situation indicated, and that we're going to work to, we discussed a way to fix that, and if you can elaborate on that.
Yes, sir. Excuse me. And so thank you for bringing this to our attention. And I spoke with Mr. Willis. I guess it's okay to say his name. Okay. Yes, I spoke with him on Thursday about the situation. And as Mr. Klein said, he clearly paid his bill. He just didn't pay the full amount. He paid $237 instead of $273. So made an honest mistake. Yeah. Tried to pay online, doing what it's supposed to do, and just didn't. And our software system does not send an alert if you haven't paid in full. So we only see that you're late or that you're on the cutoff list. We don't have a way of seeing who has paid a partial bill. So we're working on that. We are also working on, and hopefully we'll have that ready for this month, to send out both the Water Smart notification and the phone tree to send a voice message to residents who are either late or certainly that are on the cutoff list. So if we had done that, say by the 20th, then Mr. Willis would have realized, you know, he thought he paid, didn't pay the full amount. He would have known to go on to contact us or to go online or on WaterSmart to see that he still had a remaining balance. So that's something that we're going to initiate for this current billing cycle.
I would think that, so we shut off the water the same month that they don't pay?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in this case, he has a unique situation that he tried to pay the amount, he just wrote it in the number wrong online. So our staff talked to him, understand, and have no reason to think that it wasn't anything but just an honest mistake. And so in the manager's report, I was going to ask you, but since you're here now, ask you to waive those late fees and the tampering fee because it was an honest mistake, and we worked through it. A lot of the folks that pay late are frequent customers who pay late and are frequent guests on the cutoff list, but this is certainly not the case. And I think that given the situation, I would certainly support waiving those fees. I don't feel like I have the authority to do that, so I'll bring that to you.
You should probably put a note out there if you're going to shut somebody's water off.
Yeah, when we cut somebody's water off, does that require a staff actually going out and physically doing something to the meter?
For most meters, yes.
Because I was just thinking, well, was listening to Mr. Boyce's comments that we left the door knocker on his door when we found a leak.
For a
If
leak.
we're sending somebody out there anyway, could we just leave
Yeah.
something on the door?
Tag, you're off.
Yeah,
Yes.
here's the
Yeah.
phone number to
That
call
would
to
make,
settle
because I
up.
know we talked about how there's not time to like send someone out specifically to put knockers or on everyone's door, but if they're out there to
Shut it off.
Yeah,
shut
they're
it
already
off,
there anyway.
Right,
why not?
right.
They can have a stack and they can just,
So
Yeah.
most people, we have to go out and physically cut the meter. And Bill, correct me if I get any of this wrong. There are some, our frequent customers who are on the cutoff list have the remote disconnect. So we don't physically go out there to them. But for most cases, we do. And we average around, I believe it's 80 to 90 people on the cutoff list. So it's doable, but it would take staff. It would be a full day's work to go to say 90 houses from Pebble Creek to South Shore. But we could certainly do that. It's just more staff time on us. That's why I was thinking to do the email notification, the phone notification. We can do regular social media reminders of when things are due.
I don't think it's that hard to ask whoever goes out to turn it off to just put
Tag the
something.
door.
Yeah, just as a
Yeah.
courtesy. Like, you don't, like, if you're not going out anyway, I mean,
Yeah, you're already there.
if you're already there, just,
By the time we cut it off, it's already past the time to get off the cutoff list. So
well, I'm
But at
just
least
saying,
they
so, like,
know what was going
Yes.
on. I mean,
Yeah.
that was part of the.
So, like, in this
concern was the guy
situation
didn't know
where-
it was happening.
Yeah,
Sure.
where he comes home and his water's off, he's not sure if it's a city problem or a plumbing problem.
Yeah.
What days do you shut water off?
So you have to pay by 5 o'clock on the 25th.
All right, so I would have an issue shutting people's water off on a Friday. If
We
they
don't.
can't get it turned.
We don't.
We don't. Okay.
If it's a Friday, we don't. We wait till the Monday. If it's a holiday, we wait till the next business day.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just thought that would be a good time
Yes.
to visit that.
We probably want to remind people on our website of the policy. I was not aware that I needed to alert the city about what level of water usage I wanted to receive some warning about. And so we've done that now, but I think a lot of us have not paid attention to some of the particulars. So anything we can put out there so people will go, oh, okay, we need to do that.
And I would, I think we'll need to amend the policy at a future meeting to reflect these changes.
Yeah.
And I certainly, don't want to get into council acting as sort of like a billing review board. But I think that given these unique circumstances and the fact that it's a new
Sure.
policy and we're, we identified an issue with this unique situation and there, but for the grace of God, go all of us. If we need to make a motion to waive Mr. Willis's late fees and tampering fee, I would make that motion.
I agree.
I don't have any problem
But,
with
hear a
waiving
second?
those fees. I'll second if he's made
Got
a
a
motion.
second? All in favor, say aye.
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 All right,
I
very
do
good.
want to add a comment though, because it concerns me when have any of our residents think we're ignoring them, because we went to great lengths to work with this particular subdivision to make sure we provided adequate water and sewer. So that concerns me when we have that mentioned. So I want to make sure the audience realizes we did make great efforts to do what needs to be done there to provide everything.
Adrian, do we have a medical no-cut list for the water department? Because I know City of Charlotte used to have one. If you were on oxygen, you were on a no-cut list because it required oxygen. Water was involved in some aspect of it. Do we have that as a policy?
Do you know if we have that? I've not heard of an instance on that. I can certainly check the policy.
Okay. Very well. Next,
Auto pay is a good option too, to remind everybody.
Yes, if you sign up for automatic draft, you avoid all fees.
Just saying.
charges.
That's a
I've had it
solution.
for 14 years and no one has ever stolen any of my information or charged me more than what my bill is. So,
Paid a few late fees, and
Yes.
now I don't.
yes.
all right. All right, the next item on the agenda is the consider
for
the
that plug.
contract for 2001 Comprehensive Street Paving Program. Jerry?
Okay, thank you. Per the request of the city council, paving program for this year, our target is $1 million. We put it out for bid.
Nice.
We had 4 bids, all of them under $1 million. The low bid went to Light Brothers Asphalt Company, and their bid was $726,078.30. My estimate was double that amount, and it was primarily because I freaked out because I was hearing about asphalt shortages and everything else, so I wanted to make sure that I had enough that we could deal with. Since their bid was low, and I thought, well, this is a bargain at this time, I recommended that we try to reach that $1 million. In fact, I added another 9 sections of street that, based on the unit prices that they bid, would get us up to about $1,100,000 more or less. And based on that, when these actually go under construction, we get paid. We pay the contractor per ton of asphalt, per square yard of patch, and things like that. And we don't get deep into estimating that. We go out and we make some judgment calls and say 25% of this pavement on this section needs to be patched, and that's how we come up with that cost. So we expect the final cost to be less than $1 million. It'll be pretty close. The last $1 million contract we had came in under $1 million when we got down to $975,000. So I think we're in good range here with the state. In order to reach that $1 million, like I said, we added 9 sections of road. So we're in pretty good shape here. There were some sections in neighborhoods that we were already doing significant paving in, particularly Park Drive, grade school, and things like that. So for the most part, we were able to get all streets under a pavement condition rating of 50 done with this project. A few more, like I said, if we had 2 sections, well, Park Drive is a good example. It's about 7 sections, 7 blocks in there. And when we did it, given condition rating survey, it was like paved every other block. Well, that doesn't make any sense because we had lots of phone calls about that. So we chose to go ahead and pick the intermediate ones.
Yeah.
The contractor, Light Brothers Asphalt, they're a good firm. For what we've heard, they've never done work for us before, but they do major projects. They currently are doing a $1 million project
Yeah.
close by, and
These are nice roads.
they're anxious to be able to move right in afterwards. So based on that, my recommendation is that we go ahead and award contracts to them, and that we also authorize a change order contract with Additional Streets, and we get started as soon as we can. Their intent is to be able to move their equipment across
Sure.
the
Yeah.
border. When they get
Yeah.
done one place and start over here, that's fine. If that's helping us get cheaper prices, that's definitely worth it.
Does that eliminate their rally fee to rally the equipment? Does it eliminate their rally fee to?
We don't have a rally fee, we don't use that, but there's mobilization. It does not eliminate that. There's other costs of mobilization, such as their performance, completion bonds, other issues. So that's not strictly rally.
Yeah.
Jerry, just out of curiosity, I was really pleased with the last paving contract that my street was paved, but it is really thick to the point you have to almost climb over. Is there a reason or how they judge the thickness of what they need to do?
Generally, where you need to pave thick is middle. Not on that particular case. Yes, the contractor has a little bit on the sides.
Yeah.
We intend to monitor that a lot closer. We've got 2 inspectors that will be out there all the time. It's a matter of education. We taught the Blythe construction guys how to do it. They did it just fine. The last section was Red Clay Industries that did your section.
If there's an issue with the curb, do they touch that up while they go through? Or not like the concrete curb, but like on the older streets that's like asphalt and rolled up without curb and gutter. Do they touch that up?
They may or may not. If we catch it while we're out there, we'll touch it up.
I'll flag one.
So, we go, our process is once we award the contract, we meet with the contractor and we go out there. And in the field, we indicate all the patching,
Yeah.
milling, and things like that that need to be done. At the same time, curb and gutter, sidewalks, some driveways, we replace those as well as part of the paving project. But, you pay special attention along the curb. I know that's a problem.
And we've used Black Brothers before, haven't we, Jerry?
Have
We've used Black Brothers before.
we have not.
First time?
Yes, we've used Blythe Construction.
Oh, okay.
Blythe Brothers, like I said, they're working in Cramerton. Got the word yesterday today. They also did the 74 bypass down there near Monroe. Major construction. So they're considered to be, play with big boys. The asphalt industry. New firm. Just habitat that they haven't did on the projects before, but I think because they got the frame job.
Okay.
So we're prepared to work with them to get a new contract to inspect this.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions for Jerry?
No.
You have a motion to approve?
I'll motion.
Oh,
I'll motion to approve.
Got a motion?
And that is to
Second.
award and to authorize a change order to add the additional streets.
That is exactly it.
I knew it. I can read your mind. I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good.
Thanks,
Motion
Jerry.
carries. Thank you, Jerry. All right, next item on the agenda. Item number 3, consider the adoption of a reimbursement resolution for the 2021 Comprehensive Street Paving Program.
Thank you, Mayor. Now that you've approved the contract, as I mentioned in the work session before the meeting, because we've not completed our audits, we have to cash flow this one as well and then reimburse ourselves when we do get the financing, hopefully in January for this. as we did with the 2016 project, we will pay for the debt service with the combination of our PAL bill, which is the state gasoline tax that we receive, as well as the vehicle license fee, which is on every vehicle in the city. So we do have a dedicated funding source for this project. But again, in order to reimburse ourselves, you have to have this resolution authorizing that.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve.
got a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, all right, very good.
Thank
Next
you.
item on the agenda is to consider the approval of a guidance on accelerated project funding.
So I'll ask Councilman Schrift to present this
Sure,
proposal.
if you'd like to follow along, which I need you to, it's the gray
Yeah.
page,
Yes.
page 82. And so, in a lot of communities in the area, there's different organizations that raise money and contribute to different projects. Some ones that you might be able to reference would be Goat Island that has some folks. And so over time, things have shifted a little bit. We don't have a whole lot of industry that writes real large checks to us, but we have been the recipients of different donations over time. In the more recent years, we've had more of a grassroots effort from folks, neighborhoods, just neighbors, really, who've organized to raise some money for some particular different needs or purposes or some of their kind of their wishes. And so we haven't had a policy, so we've been taking them all one at a time, which honestly we will continue to do, but we've had very little guidance on how to make those decisions. So as we discussed this at the retreat, I volunteered to kind of break this out in a couple different areas. And so there's CIP and non-CIP. For the audience, CIP stands for Capital Improvement Projects. And so these are items that are on the city's list. So these are projects that we've already identified as something that we want to pursue as a city. A non-CIP item would be something that's not on our list. Not that nobody wants it, it's just not ranked on the priority list. And so over the past few years, we have been able to successfully partner with other organizations. The basketball court on the Frady Field was 100% donated. So that's one individual wanted to have a basketball court built. He raised 100% of the money. He wrote the check. He paid for it. It's a pretty good win, if you ask me. We also did the tennis courts. Now, for the tennis courts, they were ranked on our list, but they were less priority. And so after meeting with some folks, they offered to raise a percentage of the money, and they raised about $50,000, and the city did the other $150,000. More recently, the Rocky Branch Park, which is about a $450,000 project, which half of that money was raised. And so when this money's raised, it's money that the taxpayers are not paying. This is nonprofits, foundations, individuals writing checks. And so what I wanted to do was divide it, again, between the CIP list and the non-CIP list. And I guess right out of the gate, if somebody's willing to donate 100% of the money, I mean, certainly we need to still vote on it so nobody's building, a basketball court on our parking lot. But within reason, if somebody's wanting to donate 100% of the money, that should be accelerated to the top of the list for consideration.
Sure.
And none of this is binding. This is all just some guidance. So then moving forward, I thought we should break this out in three separate kind of light items as far as dollar amount goes. And you'll see that two of them are the exact same, so we can revisit how that might change for some of you. But if a project's less than $75,000, if it's on our CIP list and somebody raises a third, I thought that would give reason to have a discussion about prioritizing. So if somebody wants to build something $60,000, they bring $20,000 to the table. All the city has to do is write a check for $40,000, accelerates the process. Now, this is a project that's already identified as something we want to do.
Yeah.
If it's something that we haven't identified that we want to do, I think to garnish real consideration, they should raise 2/3. And in that situation, if somebody wants to do a $60,000 project and they raise $40,000 of the $60,000 project, I mean, if it's a decent project, it might be worth kind of moving away from the priorities list and just moving forward with it if it's a good feature for the community. $75,000 to $200,000, that has the same criteria around that. Jim pointed that out to me, which I'm aware of, and but I'm quite certain I'll receive some feedback here this evening. I thought that might be an area where you might want to interject another point. As we move up over to the $200,000 to $500,000 range, if it's on a CIP list, I mean, it's raising half the money in that situation. That's it's $250,000 of private money, I guess, versus the city, and that's a great match for a project that's in our top 10 list, right?
It is.
And then the non-CIP side, it can still be a great project, but if it's not something that's our priority, they should be tasked with raising even more money. So we did it at 2/3. Now, some of the concerns I've heard as far as kind of staff resources go, because you don't want somebody, draining all of our resources on a project that we may or may not want to be involved with. And so on the CIP list, I think if somebody's bringing something that's on the CIP list with a solution, so this is already something identified again by us as a priority, that our city could supply resources as far as applying for grants and facilitating that process, and also maybe helping with some preliminary design work and mapping that out. As part of that, since it's already on the CIP list, and it's just grant facilitation and city staff resources, I didn't see the need for that to come to city council. I thought that was something that, Adrian could direct with his staff if he wants his staff to spend time on it. But certainly they would be required to provide updates to us throughout that process. On the non-CIP list, we still want to be able to offer them opportunities to apply for grants, still want to be able to offer staff resources. In this particular situation, I felt like that if they would need some sort of support from one of our boards or advisory boards. So if it's a park project, before we go and spend our staff resources times on applying for grants, maybe perhaps that board could hear it first and say, yes, please help with this process. And same with staff resources. In that situation, it could be the Main Street Board or Parks and Rec Board, or I suppose the Planning and Zoning Board, or Earth and Science, I don't know.
Environmental sustainability.
Health and sustainability, whatever. And then also provide updates. And so that's kind of what we have here. I'm only aware of, I guess, maybe another piece of the Rocky Branch Park, or and then I guess the dog park, some of these different things that might come up here. This could be a good opportunity to kind of let organizations and foundations know that we are interested. It hasn't historically been easy to donate money to the city of Belmont. There can often be some pushback, but there are large hospitals and large utility companies, and I mean, we have a new corporate headquarters locating here hopefully in the next couple months. It would be nice to go to them, or even have our community go to them asking for money, projects that are part of our community. So that's what I have.
I appreciate your efforts, Ron.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you've done a lot of work and study on this. And I agree with you 100% as far as people helping out others, because the quality of life in our community is very important.
Yeah,
And I think this will enhance the quality of life.
And I think if you look back, you used to have a lot more Kiwanis clubs and Rotary clubs, and those aren't here. But that, I mean, I was involved with the JCs, and they're still around, not in Belmont, but in the county.
Yeah.
But prior, you would have a group of people that were like-minded, all be a part of that group.
Sure.
And then they could go raise the money and build the Rotary, concession stand in Stowe Park. And that's not happening at the same rate. And then so I think we should leave it open if there's, 45 like-minded people who all live in Belmont and they want to go raise money for this or that. There should be a path of acknowledgement and a path of recognition for that. So,
That's a good idea.
I don't know what kind of feedback you have on this.
Anybody have any questions?
You will not hurt my feelings.
Any questions for Ron?
Well, no, just a couple of comments. I mean, for me, I think it should come to council for both sides of the ledger, that we should be involved in that. It is a question of dollars. I mean, but it's also a question of ranking. And sometimes I have concerns about leapfrogging projects over identified needs. Now, CIP staff and our boards have come together to rank our projects because there's an identified need. They said, these are what we've identified as acute. It gets less acute as you go down in the rankings. So even, on this, I think it's got to be a financial approach, but also we've got to look at it as far as, okay, we are getting this money, but is it going to bump something that we've identified as an acute need off? Because even if we get half, that's still money that's going to be taken from identified need and moved to another project. So I don't know how we resolve that. Now, Park and Rec has a way to deal with this. I cannot find my Park and Rec manual from when I was on Park and Rec board, but it does deal with donations. I think we need to find that book. I've talked to several of the Park and Rec board members, and I don't think they've been onboarded properly because they don't have these books. So they don't have their bylaws. I don't think they have a real sense of what their duties, responsibilities, and powers are as a board. So I think we need to go ahead and make sure that we get them that board, because there is some things in that booklet that touches on this. We may want to take a look at that before adopting anything official, see if they can be blended. Those are just my immediate thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to work in the prioritization, because like a $1 given for a project in like the top 5, I think is probably more valuable to us than $1 given for one that's like number 20. Not to say that like if you gave enough dollars for the project, number 20, that it could shift things around. But I think that's a good point to kind of work in. And I don't think it'd be a bad idea to get Parks and Rec's input on this either, because I know that they get, I think 90% of the issues we've had with this have probably come from Parks and Rec. So I'd be kind of interested to see what they think. I think the general approach is something that I kind of like. But that would just be kind of my 2 points, is kind of figure out a way to kind of work in the CIP prioritization, which I think would also kind of create I guess a little bit of a responsibility on us to be a little bit more intentional about how we're ranking things. Because I can even remember on Parks and Rec, once you get past like number 10, it's kind of like,
Or if it's not this fiscal year, it's like, well, it could be,
right.
if we're doing 3 things this year, then after it could be 4, 24, it doesn't matter. We can figure that out next year.
Yeah, which I think would help people who want to give to projects be like, oh, okay, well, they've actually thought through this, and these are the projects that they actually kind of want to get done faster. So I think as far as like providing guidance to donors and organizations that are looking to help us out, I think being more intentional about that process and would be a big help, in my opinion.
I think we would definitely want to be notified either through Parks and Rec or Council if you have a group who is going to start fundraising or try to build something toward this, so that we're aware of it and don't necessarily discourage it, but kind of give an alert that it might not bump it as fast as you're thinking up the list. And I think since I'm always associated with the skateboard park, I remember taking a person who did not fit the demographic and ended up that Parks and Rec bumped it farther down the list. So I thought I was helping, and I actually didn't help the situation at all. So it's a really interesting dynamic, and I think we need to consider it. But what you said, we're just looking at guidelines, and probably what Richard said, to find the book so we know if we need to mesh those two together.
Yeah.
Well, I like Mark's idea of sort of like, I don't know whether it's some sort of formula or something, but like factoring in the ranking so that, if it's 2, that gets 10 points. If it's ranked 5, that might get 3 points or something like. Because that, I look at this and I like the idea. I'm a little unclear. All right, let's say it's a $100,000 project. It's on the CIP, and they raise a third. You've got a third raise. So like, then what? Like what happens when they raise a third? So I think by factoring in and maybe like a sliding scale. Lawyers love sliding scales. But that would help us gauge that all right, it's ranked number 6 on the current CIP, so pursuant to whatever formula we come up with, that adds X amount of points or something like that. We've talked about this. I still don't understand why there's 2 categories that have the exact same, percentages.
I was letting you come up with the other thing that goes in there.
Oh, well, I mean, I could offer some
I
ideas,
had to
but,
leave room for improvement.
I could say it's like maybe for CIP, it could be using your little chart, maybe 1/3, 1/2, 2/3, and then for non-CIP, 2/3, 2/3, 3/4. But I also agree with
But you
Mark.
want this tied to that specific rank of the CIP, so
Yeah.
Well, let me,
1 through 10.
Yeah, kind of like I like the points system idea that
Yeah.
Jim was kind of fleshing out.
Yeah.
Just to kind of be like, because I mean,
Because
it's
then you'd know, like
Yeah, yeah.
it's here,
Alright.
and then you'd have sort of a good idea. It
So-
wouldn't just
So less gray in discussion, more finite, definitive.
yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing from the 2 of you at least?
kind of a
Yeah.
Right.
protocol to apply evenly.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
Let me
biggest
ask
thing
you-
is that we prioritize what's going to help the city the most. That's
It's going
that's
to be a
the biggest thing.
rules-based process.
Yeah.
I love it. And
Mark
loves numbers.
Yeah,
We'll
I
write-
love numbers
I'll write
and
a
he loves
rules-based
rules.
Yeah.
process.
Well, Adrian, let me ask you a question, because you're familiar with the MPO. Now, municipalities can contribute dollars to road projects. It doesn't guarantee it'll move them up, but it increases their chances. And that money is held in escrow until such time as a project can move forward. I mean, is that something we could adopt here? I don't want to discourage private donation, but could those monies, I mean, the skate park money that was originally donated was held in escrow for what,
16 years.
16
Yeah.
years?
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of the philosophy we could blend in. We don't want to discourage it,
Yeah.
but also let them know that, it will aid in the process. It's not a guarantee that you're going to leapfrog over it, but this puts some wind at your back.
Yeah,
Possibly.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I kind of like that. I mean, far be it for me to hold up DOT as a role model of anything,
For anybody
but
else.
I think that's a good idea.
And if we're looking at all the pieces of this puzzle, one of the things that very much concerned me, that 50,000 plus, because there were private donations as well as the city, was held in an account that never was an interest-bearing account. So if you're going to hold it in escrow, all of that needs to be in an interest-bearing account.
All right, so one other thought here, just talking out loud. So I was looking at this as somebody sitting in their house saying that they want to go do something. As a document, we would provide them, and that they would kind of be able to wrestle with how realistic this would be, and then approach the city. So I hadn't really thought through the process of somebody going and raising $100,000 before they ever came to us. So how do you want me to handle that? I don't think that would happen, but it could. So,
Yeah.
I would think that people would come here as kind of the starting block, saying, hey, we heard about this, here's the project. My understanding is if we raise this money, and at that point we would kind of wrestle through and be like, yeah, that's probably not going to be more important than lights on the ball field or whatever. But
Yeah.
so I can try and indicate that somewhere if you think people are going to show up with money in hand. Which is
I
never
find,
happened.
yeah, I can think of the ABC board and the Eagle Scout are like the only people that have ever come here to give us money,
That's right.
and say, hey, I've got money. What would you like me to do with it? But we've also learned earlier today that there always is a unique situation that you might not.
So
think.
I'll offer up from here, if somebody can facilitate getting the Parks and Rec book and pull
Yeah,
that piece
staff.
out.
Well, I wouldn't mind. I sort of agree with Mark getting their input.
and then
Yeah.
handing this off to them.
Because the more I think input we get and perspectives, I think.
I think so too. Yeah.
And then when it comes back, I'll send it to you all. And I didn't hear back from anybody really this time, but you can send me some feedback back and we can try and tweak it out so we can vote on this.
So as a reminder, we don't have Brian for a whole lot longer.
Yes,
so
it's true.
Yeah.
give him feedback.
Start tweaking.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
maybe you could continue to work on this. This could be your pet project.
I can assure you that will not be the case.
And I believe so to answer Councilman Turner's question, if someone wanted to donate money directly to the city and not through like the community foundation or some other nonprofit, we could hold that in a reserve or a restricted account that would just be in our fund balance and it would build over time. So we have that mechanism. And I know Zip and I talked about the binders for the Parks and Rec Board. I thought you had given those out last year. It may not have the donation policy that we talked about when you were on the board. So we can check to see if we have that. Okay. There's one from way back when Sally was the director. But it was referencing more of like wanting to donate a bench in Stowe Park or a tree in memorial of somebody. I don't think it rose to this level, but we can certainly take a look at that document.
I think it was anything over $5,000 had to go before the Park and Rec Board. They
Right.
had to
There
look
were
at
some
it.
things staff could accept, some things had to go to the Parks and Rec Board, some things had to go to council. But we can certainly look and see if we want to merge that into this as well.
Okay.
Fantastic.
So it sounds like,
this-
from what I'm understanding, take this to the Parks and Rec Board.
Yes.
Right.
And
Yes.
do y'all meet this month? Okay, so we'll add that to your agenda, if that's okay, Madam Chair? Okay, and then, do you want to present that to them?
If I'm available.
Okay, we'll check your schedule.
Yeah.
And then you'll give feedback to
Are they
Councilman
meeting
Shrift.
in person?
Yes, in person.
Yeah.
I think this gives them at least a good financial foundation to begin from, something to look at.
All right.
Okay. So, good discussion.
Yep, perfect.
Thank you. All right. So we're
So
done
your
with
direction.
item number 4. Move on to item number 5, which is consider the approval of a site plan for the Belmont Dog Park.
Just for clarification, there was some discussion at our last meeting about whether there was a Park and Rec Board subcommittee, and there was not. I checked with Ms. Gianni and Ms. London both. So we had one member, and I think you took note of that probably in the minutes, but for the audience, there was one member of the Park and Rec Board who worked with the group that's doing this. So that's where there was confusion, because there was no designated Park and Rec subcommittee for this. So that was where there was confusion.
Thank you. So this comes to you with a recommendation from the Parks and Recreation Board for the proposed Belmont Dog Park. They reviewed this plan at their August 18th meeting, and what staff and is asking tonight is consideration of the site plan and the location for the proposed dog park. Not that you're actually authorizing that we go out and do it starting tomorrow. There's a whole separate discussion of funding, which we probably need to get clarity and finality on what we just discussed on the fundraising policy before we authorize this project. But just as background, the property is outlined in blue on the GIS. It's located on city-owned property that's vacant on East Catawba Street between 12th Street and Riverside Drive. It's about 2 acres of property that we don't have a use for. It's been vacant for many, many years. The group that's been working on this chose this site because it started with the Main Street Board. They wanted a dog. They were hoping to find a location for a dog park downtown, and there was no sites of city-owned property suitable in downtown, and certainly would be very expensive to purchase property downtown for a dog park, and it may or may not be the highest and best use for downtown land, given the price of downtown land. So they began looking outside the Main Street district, looked at the Kevin Lofton Riverfront Park, looking at city-owned properties throughout town, and landed on this one because of its visibility and its shade and its size. The plan that's in your packet on page 77 includes parking, fencing, pet waste stations, trash cans, water fountain, benches, and signage. So the site plan, basically the larger sort of, it's not exactly a rectangle, but rectangular shape is the dog park itself. It's separated into an area for small dogs and an area for larger dogs. Obviously, the larger size is for the larger dogs since they need more room to run around. It does include paved parking where on the aerial photo you saw there's some gravel that's used for parking from some adjacent neighbors. So that would be improved with paved parking spaces and of course an ADA compliant space, an access aisle. There would be gates for the dogs to enter. And then the park itself is basically fencing. That's the largest component of it. So Councilman Turner had a question about what if we wanted to do something else with this property in the future. It would already, if this project goes forward, it would already be fenced in. This would be a very easy project to remove if we wanted to if we had another need for this property. So the long area of the site plan that's got that curved lines in the middle, that is property that, if you've noticed, there's a little wooded area on 13th Street between the houses on 13th Street and the water treatment plant. That's city-owned property that's wooded. The idea is that to connect the dog park to the City Works, recreation, skateboard park campus, and utilizing some additional parking over here, we could cut a little trail through a corridor of that wooded area. That area is currently fenced in, so we'd have to put in a gate on the 13th Street side and certainly have some sort of fencing to separate that from the water treatment plant, just for security reasons of the water treatment plant. But that area would allow for a little pathway to be cut through the woods to provide more access for the park. There's some more details on page 78 of your packet. And then there's a line item breakdown of the cost estimate for the project. The total cost estimate is $68,729. There are proposals for future phases for additional amenities. If the city ever wanted to consider it, that would be an additional $22,849. But
What kind of amenities would that be?
that would be additional benches for the humans, for obstacle courses for the large
As opposed to
dogs.
the benches for the dogs?
Yeah, the dogs don't need the benches. They're gonna be
Yeah.
running around having fun. And then obstacle courses for large dogs, obstacle courses for small dogs, and then some potential bicycle racks. That's what is, and then a photo booth is also included on here. But that would obviously be a future phase. So the Parks and Rec Board met, as I mentioned, at their August 18th meeting, unanimously recommended approval of the site plan and the location for the park. They did not get into the funding or the timing or anything like that. So based on the Downtown Belmont Development Association has raised about $11,000 for that. They used that money to pay the consultant to do the site plan work that you just saw here. So they've already raised a little bit of money for this. If the total cost of the project is less than $75,000, it's $68,000 and some odd. So under your scenario, they would need to raise a third of the total cost to get this accelerated, which would be about $20,000 total. So need to raise an additional.
Was that 11,000 part of the 68,000?
No, that was the design cost. So
So once you
they've
have
raised
that-
11,000 total. So if you're looking at
But they
just
already
construction,
spent it, right?
yes, on the consultant.
But
So
20 is
they'll
not
Spent
a
some of
third
it,
of
spent some of it
68.
on the consultant, not the full amount on the consultant.
Oh. They need to raise more than 20. 20 is not a third of 68. 20 is a third of 60.
Yeah.
They
I
need
think
to
he-
raise like 23.
He was rounding, I'm not sure. But I was thinking the 11,000 would be added to the 68 because the total cost of the project. would
Right,
be
because that's
70.
just construction costs. So if you want to factor in all the costs, the design and everything
I
else.
guess
Well, that's
something else we-
79.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then-
We can
and-
further complicate your policy.
And to
discussion
further
for another day.
complicate it, if you did, let's say you did approve this, then if you're looking at phase two, would they be required to raise amount of money for that? Or is the city on the hook to do the phase two part if it comes through? So, you've got that piece of it as well.
There's some-
So this is currently ranked as the number 10 priority in the Parks and Rec CIP list. So this would not come up, if we want to strictly follow the sequential order of the CIP, we would need to do projects 1 through 9 first, unless there is non-city money coming to it and to follow
So what's
whatever
the
policy.
process to have an item either moved up or down? on the CIP list? Is that decided by the advisory board?
So with Parks and Rec, it is a discussion between the Parks and Rec staff and the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. They meet generally annually with Jerry, and they go over the CIP list. There's no rule that you couldn't do it more frequently than annually, but we do it annually in preparation for the budget.
And then then Jerry meets with us about all the different, and then we could say, because didn't we do that with like the intersection at Park and Catawba, and say we want to move this up? So,
Yes.
Typically I think this past, we've only done this once, Mark and I, but, we generally, I think, just defer to the Parks and Rec Board. But if there was something we really thought was important, I guess when Jerry comes to us, we could say, well, in Parks and Rec, let's move 3 up to 1 or something like that.
Okay.
There was some other discussion about liability and rules, and I've checked on that. The League of Municipalities, who is our liability insurance provider, estimated that the cost to cover a dog park of this size would be $345 a year. So not
That's what the
huge,
board pays you.
and then they did provide a set of recommended rules for the park, which are on page 80 of your packet, which, if this project moves forward, we would obviously need to develop rules for, but just these are some of the things that we would need to be cognizant of at that appropriate time.
Have we quantified the maintenance? Because I imagine that we'd have to have people out there cleaning up and.
I actually asked Bill Carroll to investigate that, if you'd like to have him comment on it. I don't know what he found.
Is there grass there now?
Yes.
So as far as the actual quantity and the actual amount, I didn't have time to investigate actual dollar amounts for you. From conversations I had with surrounding towns and the county that have dog parks, it seems the maintenance is fairly limited. No more than probably 30 minutes to an hour of staff time, probably 1 or 2 people for the size of dog park. And it also depends largely on if we have limbs or debris fall from trees, if grass needs to be cut, which will probably have to be done weekly, as well as any additional maintenance to the fencing, if the fencing is damaged, if dogs dig holes, that kind of stuff. From everyone I talked to, it seems like typically less than an hour daily, but it would have to be visited daily by staff at a minimum.
Did they determine, or did they indicate to you whether people are good about keeping the area clean? That was one of the concerns I know a number of us had.
So I did ask that question, and the indication were that dog owners are pretty good about it. There's no evidence to suggest that Belmont dog owners would be any worse than other towns, like Mount Holly. But we don't know that until we actually get out there and look at it. But their indication was that they don't have a huge problem, but still daily the staff would have to kind of observe the area and pick up anything that was left there. But from what I heard, it wasn't terribly bad from their perspective.
And in terms of mowing, they're mowing it now, are they not? Because it's like right there.
Yes, it's mowed.
So that wouldn't add anything.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there may be some additional landscaping depending. Some research I did, dog parks of this size typically don't have terrible grass growth issues, although they can depending on where dogs are urinating. And so there may be additional landscaping maintenance to keep grass growing, but it didn't seem to be anything extreme from what I could find.
Thank you. All right.
Well, I mean, a lot of this is well and good, but it's putting the cart before the horse, because all we need to decide today is, the request is to consider the site plan and the location, and we can worry about financing and all of that later. And I have a feeling that the site plan and location will be grounds for debate enough. So perhaps that's what we should turn our attention towards.
What the Parks and Rec decided on this?
So they voted at their August 18th meeting unanimously to recommend approval of the site plan and the location.
I like the location. For me,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a dog. I don't go to dog parks, but a lot of folks have big yards that have dogs.
Makes sense.
And then there would be people that don't have big yards that have dogs, and the people that don't have big yards live in apartments or townhomes. And with the Aberfoyle Mill apartments, and then the apartments being built on Wilkinson Boulevard, where the Greenway kind of ties back down to this area, I think it's fairly centrally located to where a lot of our new development activity is going to be occurring, especially for people living in tighter quarters who might have dogs. And, I don't have a better place in mind. I didn't realize you had indicated there'd be lots of debate. I didn't come prepared with a whole lot of debate. I thought it was pretty good plan the way it was.
Yeah.
If you're going to do a dog park, that's a fine spot to do it.
There are other
The only
places.
question, I'm sorry.
Okay, but
I mean, the only question that I have about this site relates to the rec center. And it relates to the rec center because we put in 3 basketball courts to bring in tournaments. And I'm all for that. I don't know what the flow for that is going to look like, and meaning how many people. When I look at this site, I see potential overflow parking because I don't know, mom, dad, sister, brother, grandparents. I don't know how many people per player will converge on this site. It's probably safe to say that people who go to Kevin Lofton Park will also park at the rec center. So I don't want to get in a situation where we're short on parking. That's the one question mark that I would have. I don't know the volume of people that will attend these tournaments because it's over multiple days. I mean, so that's just one question that I have. If we commit to a dog park there, then we have no other options for overflow parking that I'm aware of in the area. So that's just one thought that I
and
have.
that's a concern I have as well, because basically we're building a complex, and we talked about concerts at Lofton Park. So if you do that, and then we have some parking here, you're gonna have rec center parking, you're gonna have the skateboard park. So you've got a complex here. So to my way of thinking, in my opinion, would be that if we think this is an appropriate site, which I still think there are others possible around there, maybe Davis Park, then I think we need to defer it until after we've completed the Parks and Rec Center and determine if it looks like we're going to need that for parking, because I do not want these people or us to spend the money and then find out that we're going to have to move it somewhere else. So that would be my opinion. So we have some of the same thoughts on that.
Well, they've already spent the money in getting the site plan prepared. Certainly, again, no matter what we do today, sorry, a sign just fell down. They're not going to, they're probably going to still be trying to raise money. They're not going to be going forward with anything. However, we determine whatever the measurements are for our citizen-funded accelerated projects. Let me ask a question about the process by which we arrived at this location, because it's, there have been some suggestions perhaps that this was haphazard or that other sites were not considered. So maybe somebody with more insight into that can speak to, certainly it seems that some locations in the downtown area were considered and were considered not viable. So how is this settled on as a location? Was it a deliberative process? That would be my question.
Yes, so a good question, and
I only ask a question.
Yes, sir. That's why you're an attorney, right? So when we looked, the group that started this with the Main Street Board looked at Stowe Park, found that it was not a good spot in Stowe Park for a dog park. Looked at other open space, and the city doesn't own a whole lot of land downtown, and so obviously there's the land beside the police department, but not a great site for the dog park. So then they started looking at city-owned property outside the downtown. Once we identified the properties that the city owned outside the downtown area, the board met with, I believe Cip met with them, David Eisenhower, Chuck Flowers, and I met with them to look at the river park. We thought we had a good site at the river park, but it ended up not, it just wasn't going to work. And then we looked at this site here to determine that this met the desires to have a park that's in the central part of town, so that it is more accessible, but also that was shaded and did not have a plan for it and would be relatively easy to develop.
Yeah.
What about the area that we considered at one point for the skateboard park there near the Legion Hut, that kind of area? And then on the other part of Davis Park, on the part closest to the houses, did they look at that as well?
I'm not sure, and if anybody that was a part of that is here, I don't know if they looked at Davis Park or not.
I mean, that to me seems like a good spot, just as someone kind of, I mean, it's already got parking. There's sidewalks all over the place. It's very walkable. Still very central to downtown. I mean, I don't know how distance-wise how much closer this one is to that one, but just intuitively, I mean, if I was going to pick between this one and that one, I'd probably lean more towards Davis, but I'd just be kind of interested in exploring that a little bit.
Yeah,
Davis Park is much larger than people think it was. I don't know if you recall, but there was within the Park and Rec Board, Nikki Lineberger and some other members wanted to extend the ball field to Davis Park, so they were going to put in a huge retaining wall and basically double our field space. So I mean, there is land back there. It is challenged somewhat with the topography, but I mean, I kind of like Davis Park also. I live in that general area, and I see a lot of people walking dogs. But you could have something similar to what they're proposing, and in the area that's the topography is a little bit more challenging. I've been using Rocky Branch Park a lot lately, just to walk. I mean, you could do a trail through there if you wanted to. You give two options: the traditional dog park where you let them off the chain. Maybe you could put a trail system in there to walk them internally to use that property that we've got that's just sitting there. But I mean, I'm not opposed to the dog park. I mean, the proposed location to me, it's only a concern because I don't know what the future holds for our programming and the need for parking.
Adrian, I was involved with County Parks and Recreation Board when we had the discussion with the dog park at Poston Park, and that was a real contentious thing. But we approved it, went on with a large dog, small dog park. It's worked out fine. I haven't had any problems at all. And there's plenty of parking down there because people come during the certain times of the day to bring their dogs down there, and they don't stay all day. So it's just a situation that I think this location that we have here is a good location. I don't think there's a problem with that,
And
personally.
regarding the parking, and I forget the exact numbers, but when we were doing the site plan for the recreation center, and that had to get the conditional zoning, and it went to the planning and zoning board, they had a big concern and a discussion, and I think they even deferred action for a month to talk about parking and what would happen if Zip programmed a tournament at the recreation center. How would we handle the parking? And so CPL did an analysis of all the city controlled parking spaces and found that it met our requirements between the rec center, the City Works building, the Riverfront Park. If you had a huge tournament, then we would try to partner with Gaston College to use some of their parking. So it would be up to us to make sure that we don't hold a skateboard event, a dog event, a basketball tournament or volleyball tournament, and have city employees working here and just overutilize that. So there would be some scheduling and programming coordination that would have to happen. My hunch is most of the time it would be fine. Probably the Saturday mornings when
Right.
there's basketball games, the parking lots are going to be full because each kid's probably going to generate 2 or 3 cars from family members. I don't know what the skateboard park's going to generate in terms of parking demand, but they could certainly use the city staff parking lot, assuming they're not here Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. But you would allow for parking on site as well as through the trail system parking here. So I think based on the analysis we did for the rec center, most of the time it'd be fine. It would just be those peak demand issues. And if folks wanted to go to the dog park and they couldn't find a place to park, they probably just wouldn't go. That's what I do when I go downtown.
Yeah, I think it's a good location.
I'm good with the location, but if you guys want to revisit a different spot, I think the city should pay for the design work at that point. I mean,
I don't know about
this
that.
went through the whole process.
Yeah.
You got unanimous support from the Parks and Rec
Yeah.
Board. And
But that was after the fact. I mean, the design work was done when they went to Parks and Rec Board. So I would not be in favor of that. I'm in favor of looking at all the sites before we jump into it, because, but that's,
who's going to look into the sites?
I would assume Parks and Rec Board would.
They already did that. They voted on this last night or last
Yeah.
week. or
No,
something.
but Ryan, what we're just saying, they did not look at the Davis Park site at all, from what we're hearing.
Well, if they didn't think that this site was appropriate, they could have voted against it.
Yeah. What are we doing here?
Well, this has been one of the strangest situations all along, because we've not done our own procedures and processes that we've been involved with. So I will not be in favor of it unless we just want to defer it. So that once again, I'm certainly just one vote.
What are we deferring it for?
Until we see how this complex plays out and whether we end up with concerts at Kevin Lofton, which we talked about at one point.
Maybe we
And
should
we're
wait
gonna
on the
do-
skateboard park.
Excuse
then,
me?
Too.
Ryan, that's not pertinent to this conversation.
I mean, it's all right here.
I just stated what
Both
I
are
need
on
to
the
state.
CIP list.
But
I've
they've
stated
still
everything I
got
need to
some
say.
money they need to raise, right? I mean,
Yes.
is there any harm in just kind of holding this in our back pocket until they've
That's what I'm
raised the money
proposing.
that they
Yeah.
need to raise?
How are they going to raise money if they don't have a site
Yeah.
location?
Well, to be honest, they've already raised money.
I know. but,
correct.
I mean,
Without it.
they've spent that. I mean, I would imagine if there's no site, there's no project.
All right.
Um,
I'll make a motion to approve the site.
Well, let me-
Oh, well-
let me just add, is there any wisdom in getting through what we have on the table already with Park and Rec before bringing anything else to the table? I mean, we've got a $14 million facility we've got to get going, which includes a skate park. There is the possibility of a splash pad, which has been talked about for a very long time at Kevin Lofton's Park. I mean, there's a lot of issues on the table right now. So,
But again, I mean, we're not, like, all we're talking about is a site location, a site plan, that could end up being like the skate park and maybe 16 years from now, sufficient money.
probably not the best use of that land and not appropriate there. So we moved it to the Park and Rec facility, which to me seems okay. Now you're saying the park, this dog park is centrally located. I don't really agree with that, because that was also an argument used against moving the skateboard park. You know, that the kids were gonna have to ride their
Oh, I meant-
skateboards to
I meant
get there.
centrally located to apartments.
Well, I want to, yeah, well, I mean, if there's going to be use by Greater Belmont, I don't want to centrally locate it next to apartments and have the greater majority of Belmont have to drive to it. You know, I mean, if the goal is centrally located and to maximize the use and make the offering as comprehensive as possible to the greatest number of people, then I think Davis Park or something else might fit that bill. But again, I mean, these are just the questions I'm wrestling with. I'm neither for nor against the dog park. But I am struggling with the location somewhat.
Well, let me ask Adrian and/or Parks. So Ryan has made a motion.
Yeah.
Let's assume it's seconded. and voted down, what would be the effect? I mean, if it's voted up, then we've got the location for the dog park. Nobody's committed nobody's on the financial hook for anything. If it's voted down, what's the effect of that?
You don't have a site.
Yeah,
Or a location?
correct. We would tell the folks that are supportive of this that they would either need to look somewhere else, but this is not the appropriate location.
Well, I mean, could we also just say we're deferring it to
I like
review
the
other
site plan.
locations? I mean, say, no final decision has been reached, but we feel like we want to just explore other locations.
Certainly, but his question was if you wrote it down.
Yeah. But how would that, I guess my question then would be like how would that be done? Like if we want to explore other locations, considering that the planning or the Parks and Rec Board has already recommended this location.
Like I said, Adrian, we argued over the county location for Poston Park. There's a lot of things, but a lot of tournaments go on down there, a lot of ball playing and stuff like that, and everything goes on down at Poston Park, a very busy park. And it's never been a problem with the dog park. Never. So we have a motion on the floor.
I'll second it.
Got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No,
No.
One opposed.
Opposed?
Huh?
3,
How many opposed?
3.
3.
Motion failed.
All right. That's it. Let's move on to the next item. Consider the adoption of an ordinance establishing rules for the Belmont Skate Park.
Thank you, Mayor. As we are working to build our first skate park, liability concerns are certainly top of mind. And so I reached out to, as I mentioned earlier, the League of Municipalities, who is our liability insurance provider, to see what the skate park would do to our insurance coverage. And surprisingly, it's not going to have a big impact to it because the General Assembly changed the statute several years ago, recognizing that there was a shortage of what they considered high hazard recreational uses across the state because local governments were concerned about liability for high hazard recreation. So North Carolina General Statute 99E 21 through 25 provides rules that local government has to adopt in order to reduce their liability exposure for injuries caused by normal use of high hazard recreation, which includes skateboard parks. So based on the city of Hendersonville's ordinance that the League of Municipalities sent to me, drafted a proposed amendment to Chapter 96 of the Code of Ordinances that are found on page 86, 87, and 88 of your packet. That would be a new section of Chapter 96, would be 96.05, to set forth rules of the public skate park facility. So this has the definitions, and then it follows the statutory requirements. So if you approve this ordinance amendment to Chapter 96 of the Code of Ordinances, then when we build the skateboard park, we post the rules. We provide limited supervision, as the statute requires. Basically, you use it at your own risk, but you have to follow the rules. And then that reduces our liability exposure. So the Parks and Rec Board passed this out at the Parks and Rec Board meeting on the 18th. They don't need to, procedurally, they don't vote on ordinances, but I did just give them to them for any comments. I have not received any comments from them. This is pretty cut and dry based on what the statute says and what other cities have done. I did look at a couple others besides Hendersonville, and it's all worded very similarly. So I do recommend that you approve this ordinance so that we will reduce our liability exposure for the skate park.
Just a quick question. Does this reduce our liability or remove our liability?
You can't remove, but it would only, if I'm reading it right, only in cases where there was gross negligence or willful misconduct, or we knew about some condition that participants of the skate park did not, and we did not tell them of said condition, so that it's more limited than just ordinary negligence.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, hopefully, when I talked to the people in Waynesville who have the large park, they said they had broken arms and that kind of thing, but no lawsuits. So wishfully, we would be looking at that kind of situation.
Okay.
I had a question about H3. There's, like, the rules of the skate park say, in subsection 3, there's one phrase, every person riding a skateboard at this facility, and then skateboard in the facility. And so I'm wondering if that's like a typo, or, what is it? Is it at the facility or in the facility? And also, do the knee, elbow, and helmet, knee pad, elbow pad, and helmet requirements apply just to skateboarders or to rollerbladers and roller skaters as well? That's not clear.
So I would strike the word after the comma, skateboard in the facility, skateboard at the facility, because it's an open air facility. I don't know if it makes a difference at or in, but you're sort of at there, you're not in there, since it's outdoors. But the statute does require that they wear a helmet, elbow pads, and knee pads.
Right. But there's also some discussion of rollerbladers and roller skaters.
Yes.
If, assuming they're allowed to use that.
Assuming they were allowed, they would need to wear that as well. So
All right.
we would need to add that
Okay.
under.
Let me ask you a question.
We could.
First, parks, is the language the best we can get? Is there anything that should be done to tweak the language, or are we okay with this verbiage?
What?
Are we okay with this verbiage, the language, the best we're gonna get?
Yeah. Unless you have a particular concern that you want addressed.
Well, the only thought that I had, I know Matthew and my older son skateboarded for a while, and if I'm not mistaken, there are like approved, whatever governing body governs skateboarding, there was one at one time. They have approved helmets, approved pads that receive their endorsement. Do we need to add language that, these are, and I may be nitpicking here, but I don't want somebody to come back and say, well, my kid was wearing, some cheap helmet bicycling, you should have given notice that, you're supposed to wear these approved gear when participating in a formalized setting.
The statute only just says wear a helmet. It doesn't say
Okay.
Who endorses the
Well,
helmet, or the
people are
quality of the
very
helmet.
litigious right now, and I don't want somebody to look at it and pick it apart and say, well, you should have specified approved.
I'd be concerned about specifying too much and
Yeah.
then they follow it and get hurt.
Okay.
That'd
Well,
be
I just
the
think
other side of it.
what,
Yeah,
the
I mean, that's just equally as
yeah.
valid.
the statutes have their requirements, and I looked, and the things that the statutes require are in the rules. And then if we want to go into more detail or whatever, but I think that everything there, and I assume that when it's built, it will be so designated, because the only thing I didn't see was that designated, it has to be designated as a skate park, but obviously that can't happen until it's built. So I'm assuming at that point, it would be designated as a skate park.
Yes, and there was discussion during the design about whether or not to allow BMX bikes and other users. And I think we landed on skateboard and maybe inline skates, but primarily it would be skateboard. But it would not be bicycles or anything else.
Okay.
I'd
Anybody have any other
Move to
questions?
approve, subject to the amendments we talked about.
I'll second.
Move in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is consider approval of amendments to the Belmont Code of Ordinances regarding civil penalty amounts.
Thank you. Lindsay Yeager, our code enforcement officer, will present this. So she's got two items. The first is an update on some code of ordinance amendments that you have requested to strengthen some of our penalties for various sections of the ordinance. So Lindsay, I'll turn that over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well.
So this item is to consider the approval of amendments to the amount of the civil penalties that we have. As we discussed in our previous meetings, the standard penalty amount of $50 that we currently have in place for code violations is no longer effective in maintaining compliance throughout the city. So after doing some research and referring to our state general statutes, I feel that increasing them from $50 to $150, with the maximum amount being $500, would be significantly more effective. Also, with that, implementing a process for chronic violators, which are individuals who have received 3 notices of violation in the previous year. And this process would eliminate the repetitive issuance of notices to chronic violators. And it would actually increase their penalty amount to $250 for the 4th offense, and then $500 for the 5th and subsequent offenses.
How often do they get a fine? So like if somebody leaves a dishwasher on their porch and you fine them, how long until the second one comes?
So the process is right now, you send a notice of violation, they get 10 days.
Mhm.
Then you send a final notice of violation, and they get 10 additional days. Normally by that time, it's normally cleared up.
Yeah, I guess the question was more regarding to repeat offenders.
Repeat offenders, so if someone is a repeat offender, they actually wouldn't get a notice because they've already had several before then. And of course, we would send a letter letting them know that they're now a repeat offender. And so then they would just be, they would automatically get a fine. A letter that's
Would that happen once a month if they didn't fix it? Or
they didn't fix it, and eventually would be 500. They got 5 more.
Okay.
Because a lot of the issues I found are mostly the same situation.
yeah, that's the issue. It's the same people every time. Yeah.
Hopefully this will, if it's approved, will knock that out. And then all the ordinance adjustments are located in the agenda packet.
Yes.
Lindsay, did you take several places to model this after?
I looked at the city of Charlotte. I looked at what Gaston did us. And I kind of followed along and really found a happy medium where it wouldn't be too extravagant, but
Yeah.
would still have a little teeth, to get point across what we're trying to get compliance.
Any other municipalities in the county besides Gastonia?
Not in this county. I did look at Framerton, actually. I did look at it.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just have one quick question, and I may be jumping the gun, but I'm just looking at my notes. Subsection 111.01B, page 139. We're getting ready to go into campaign season, and I'm just wondering how that will impact people handing out campaign materials. Because it says it shall be unlawful for any person to hand out, distribute, throw, place, or deposit any printed or written advertising material or paper of any kind whatsoever on the streets or sidewalks of Belmont. So people often hand out handouts, and within the city park at BooFest, I've seen people actually do it on city streets or campaigning. On sidewalks within subdivisions, when you're walking in a neighborhood, you run into people. Are you going to be subject as a candidate to multiple fines being levied?
I wouldn't say so. I think that was already existing in the ordinance.
Okay, well, I mean, it might be a
Yeah.
stretch, but that caught my eye.
That almost sounds somewhat antiquated. I mean, that particular part of the code. So I'm not sure about what we need to either amend that or not have that particular piece there.
I mean, it just caught my eye because me personally, I'm the only one I think up here going in, well, Charlie, going into a campaign. I don't want to be in multiple violations.
Would it be considered
Well, and it-
advertising?
I thought elections were under other people's
Yeah.
Are
authority.
they? Okay.
Same as like the do not call list and all that.
Because like who wrote
Exactly.
the code?
Yeah. So,
You think they're going to prevent that?
so
Well-
Lindsay, if somebody puts a sign out like on the highway that says, I don't know, I buy houses, and it's the same person, can we start finding them $500? Okay. I like that.
I have a couple questions. Section 1099, so this general provision, I'm a little confused by it, that we're increasing it to $500. But if we're increasing, if you read 1099, it says a violation of any provision of this code of ordinance, we're changing it to is going to be a $500 fine. But if that's the case, why do we have all these other provisions that say fines of $150, $250?
So the 500 would be what someone could be, that would give us the leverage between a accidental violator or a chronic violator. Gives us a mid-between to where we could give them a fourth chance of $250 and then eventually the 500 maximum amount.
So if someone violates the code that has a $150 fine, you can either assess $150 or $500, depending on the situation.
If they were to become a chronic violator.
If any person shall violate any provision of this code of ordinances, he shall be guilty of a class 3 misdemeanor and shall be fined not more than $500 or imprisoned for not more than 30 days unless otherwise provided. That's what. I'd sort of like to say something like, for which no other penalty is provided, or something like that's our sort of, isn't that our fallback? Like, because I mean, to me, it just doesn't make sense to say you're fined up to $500 unless otherwise provided.
So is it like the default?
Yeah, I think it's like the default.
The way I read that, I certainly defer to the expert and the city attorney, is that it sets the maximum fine at $500, and then there are various fines throughout the code of ordinances that were $50. Now they'll go to $150. So you'd start out following that whatever code of ordinance fine of $150 per citation, and then it escalates from there. But you're capping it in 1099 at $500.
I see. Yeah.
You wouldn't start there.
Right, so it was 50.
Right.
Okay. All right. Oh, that makes sense.
I think they'll get the message.
Let's see. So 92.03B3, you've defined a chronic violator, but there's also reference to a repeat offender.
Repeat offender chronic violator.
All right. Well,
We can always change it.
yeah. I mean, if I read that, I'd say, well, you use the phrase chronic violator or repeat offender, and that to me means they mean different things because you use different terms. So I would say a repeat offender would be somebody, if a chronic violator is somebody who's engaged in 3 or more violations, to me that would mean a repeat offender would be somebody who's engaged in 2 violations. Yeah.
So we could keep it just chronic violator.
Yeah.
Which actually comes from.
Right, and that's a defined term, and repeat offender is not. So if your goal is to treat them the same, I just remove repeat offender because to me it implies it means something different if you're going to use that term along with chronic violator or chronic offender. In 92.99C2, if you look at the preamble to that, 99.99C, we're changing the fine from $50 to $150 per violation. So if you look at C2, I think the reference to $50 in C2 should also be changed to $150. Let me see.
It says a statement that if the violation is not corrected within 30 days after the date of service of the warning citation, violator shall be issued a second citation, assessing him or her with a $50 penalty for each violation.
Yeah, so we've just said $150 in the one, and now we're saying $50 in the. So I think it should be changed to $150 to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can change that.
All right.
An oversight.
Okay. All right. Okay, those are the ones, the major ones that there's some
Good catch.
spelling issues, but I can catch up with you on that.
Yes, sir.
Jim's not going to miss anything like that.
I had a very specific question. 98, where'd it go? 9809, dust and mud on public streets and rights of way. So let's say, I mean, I'm sure this never happens, but big rain event and silt fence fails and spills mud all over Main Street. Is that subject to a fine here?
It could be, I would probably look at this one more, but it would, in the ordinance, it would fall underneath that.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Unless otherwise, unless
There-
it says otherwise.
Yeah, there's currently not a fine associated with that. It just says that whoever did it has to remove it at their sole responsibility and expense.
okay.
And the only two complaints we get is either dust or mud. It just depends on the weather.
Right. Well, I guess my thought, because I saw here under C, it says penalty, C 1099, which goes back to the $500 penalty that Jim was just talking about. So I guess that's kind of where my mind was going with this, was if somebody dumps mud all over Main Street or any road.
I definitely see where you're coming from. I could go back and, we could go through all the ordinances and see what's missing.
Well, I mean, Tower Crest, for example, I mean, I think they've dumped on North Main now 3 times, pretty excessively.
Right.
Very high profile. People are complaining a lot about that.
Yeah. 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 Because I think, putting some, because I noticed that I think the county came out and yelled at them, but I noticed that the fine on that was 0. So I was hopeful that maybe if we started addressing some of the, we can do that through code enforcement.
Right. So generally what we do is our inspectors make them clean it up. They require them to get a water truck and wash the street. If they just refuse to do that, then I would suggest we do the $150 citation, consistent with everything else.
Okay.
But we could certainly add that to that.
Yeah, definitely.
Got some chief here.
That is something we deal with regularly, and code enforcement does go out and have them clean the mud off the road, so it happens, they get the mud on the road. So if they don't clean it off, we give them an opportunity, our intent's not to, we give them an opportunity to clean it up pretty quickly. And
Yeah.
most of them comply, some of them don't, but yeah, so we try to work, but we understand you don't get, we do have neighbors, the reason I'm saying this, we have people, residents who call us and say, hey, there's mud on the road, they got mud on the road, we want to charge. But then they might reach out to you. The problem is they're working and it's muddy. So to give them an opportunity, I don't think it's feasible to charge someone as soon as you got there, there's mud on the road.
Right.
If they're developing a neighborhood. So,
I agree.
So we weigh it out and look at, if they're, what offender level they're in.
Right. Well, I was thinking in this situation, it seems like they're kind of flirting with that chronic violator situation. So, yeah. Okay.
And I think that's when you would issue the citation if they're just not responding to Lindsay or Gary or Kyle.
Okay.
I mean, if we're gonna apply that to development like Tower Crest, I mean, is there a question of scale here at all? The homeowner who's doing some work, who gets some mud in the road, maybe cleans it, maybe doesn't, is subject to the same penalty as a development who's putting considerably more mud out there. I mean, I don't know if that's a question of issue or not, but I mean,
Yeah, that's a good point.
do you break it out somehow? I mean, because I've been tilling in my yard trying to put a new lawn several years back and got excessive rain, and I had mud going down the street and in my driveway. But I mean, I got out there and hosed everything down and washed it out. But you get a homeowner that doesn't care. But should those penalties? I mean, I don't know. That's something smarter folks to figure out than myself, if that's scalable or not.
So it doesn't look like right now we have that authority to issue a monetary penalty. So I like the idea of doing that. Then you just have to have discretion and common sense. I mean, we're not going to go after you and charge you $150 because you got a little bit of dirt coming off your driveway. But if it's a chronic
half my
issue,
yard,
if
yeah.
it's half your yard washed away, and we said, Mr. Turner, you need to put some grass down, and stabilize this, and you just don't, and then it's affecting your neighborhood, then that's probably another tool that you would have to do that. But certainly in all of these, our goal is not to make money off of code enforcement violations. It's to get compliance. And what we have found is the $50 citation in a lot of cases is just the cost of doing business. And so that's why I think even last month you were asking to let's beef this up so that we have some teeth so we will get people's attention.
And like you're saying, the main goal is not to make people have to pay. It's, you know, first we want to communicate and educate and, you know, do all the steps that I can without having to find anybody, but having the leverage of having, you know, something that I can use in case they don't comply, is definitely very helpful, especially when you have tons of complaints coming in and everything like that. It's a lot. $50 is a big issue.
Okay,
All right.
all right.
Why don't you make the motion, Jim?
Sounds like it's gonna be complicated.
Well, I'd move to approve these amendments subject to the additional revisions and amendments that we've discussed tonight.
I'll second.
Got a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay. You're still up next for the next one. Consider the approval of an ordinance requiring the demolition of the structure at 305 Divine Street.
All right. So this item is to consider the approval of an ordinance for the demolition of 305 Divine. The minimum housing case on it was opened in July of 2011. There were no enforcement actions taken since July of 2013. An interior and exterior inspection was conducted on 2/12/21, and it was found to be deteriorated and hazardous to the health and safety and general welfare of others. A hearing was held on 2/26/2021. The owner was issued an order to repair and demolish and had a due date of 6/24/2021. He was also given a little additional time to get some of his items out of the house, but has failed to comply with the order. And I have received 2 bids for the demolition of this structure, and those are, the first one was $6,000 for Millis Construction Group, and the second one was $4,500 for Carolina Utility and Storm.
And that's been vacant for 10 years. Unbelievable.
Do you know either of these companies?
I do.
Have we used them before?
We got quotes from them last time. We did not use them.
All right.
I noticed though, I walked by it the other day, they still had a Sealinger for City Council sign on the property.
I'm not sure how that ended up there.
Well, you get what somebody does
Not really in the
for 10
practice
years,
of
though.
putting my campaign signs outside of vacant houses. You can feel free to take that with the debris. Yeah.
Hey, Mark, you're not gonna get their vote.
Don't we have to get those up 10 days after?
Yeah,
the
and that you didn't remove it 7 days after.
Oh, crap.
Might be that's $150, sir.
No, $500 as of today.
Yeah, I think I'm a chronic violator at this point.
That's funny. All right.
That's cash, by the way.
I'll write you a check when we're done.
Everyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the lowest bid.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor,
Hold
say aye.
on,
And to approve the ordinance for demolition.
yes,
And
I'm
to
pretty
approve-
sure he said that.
and to
Yes.
approve the ordinance for demolition.
Okay.
and Martha
And I'll
second.
second, yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
motion carries.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, Lindsay. I appreciate your hard work, too. Next item on the agenda is item C, discussion of the potential ordinance amendment to require fencing around stormwater ponds.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Turner requested this be added to the agenda to discuss potentially amending our stormwater ordinance for, and erosion control ordinance for fencing of stormwater control ponds. So I'll turn it over to Councilman Turner.
Yeah, I noticed this when I was walking the Amberley subdivision, that their stormwater ponds, particularly one in particular, is at the foot of some houses that really have no backyard, and it's just pretty much a sheer drop into those ponds. So I started worrying about, children, pets, whatever, in general. But I was out there and it was raining, and I was watching the water level. I mean, these things, it was a fairly heavy rain. I went out there to look at some of the silt fencing that had been reported down, and it was a cloudburst, so these things fill rapidly. Now they decrease over time, but they do fill rapidly. So it was just a safety concern I wanted to bring before council to consider new development, being required to put fencing around these ponds, because I know myself, when I was 10, 12, maybe younger, if I lived there, I would be out and about these ponds all the time. Kids, anybody can get stuck in one of these ponds. It was not that long ago that we had, I think, an elderly gentleman over near Walmart, one of the developments there. He walked out into a dry area of this retention pond and got stuck. And he laid there for some time before somebody found him and called out the fire department to come out and rescue him. And they had to lay ladders out to reach him, so they didn't get in. I mean, I personally have been stuck in them. I don't know if any of you have stepped in them, but it creates a very intense vacuum sometimes that you cannot pull free from. I had to undo my boots, step out, get out of there, and come back at a later date to try to dig out my boots. Primary concern is the rapid rise in the water level, the murkiness of the water, and the proximity of kids of all ages, particularly younger ones. So, I mean, it's just, to me, it's a potential safety issue. And I think they could fence these retention ponds. Of course, they'll pass it on, they'll spread it out over the new homes. But I mean, it's just something I wanted to bring to you all for your consideration.
What would the process be, assuming we're amenable to this? Would it be a charge to the planning director to come up with an amendment to the land development code and present that to the planning board and then to us for final approval?
I don't believe it would be the land development code. I believe it would be the code of ordinances.
Okay.
It would be the watershed ordinance, I believe, and the stormwater ordinance.
Okay.
So it would not need to be a text amendment to the land development code that goes through the planning board. It would be
Just
like,
come to-
well, what you just did to amend
Okay.
the code of ordinances. So if you direct staff to do that, we will comb through those and make sure that we amend the proper ordinances.
So does that mean, like, for properties that are already built and don't have them, that, like, do we have any way of requiring? No,
They would be
I didn't think
grandfathered.
so, but,
Yeah.
right,
And
okay,
so we don't have a requirement that they fence. Some are fenced. They
right.
do it themselves, but we don't have a requirement. So if you amend the code, this would be something that we would let them know during the plan review phase.
If you were to classify it, is it life safety? Would that eliminate the grandfathering?
I don't know.
Adrian, one question. I don't know that we have very many in our area, but if it's a rain garden, normally that's not going to be the same level of water coming in and that kind of thing. Is that still the case with rain gardens, or do you know?
I was just looking at it strictly as these stormwater retention ponds.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, but I want to make sure that we don't need to discriminate between the two. In other words, if it's a retention pond, definitely, but the rain gardens, at least some years past, were they were not as deep, they're not as steep, that kind of thing. So I would want, and the idea was that it looked like a part of the landscape to handle a minimal amount of water, not to handle the amount of a standard retention pond would.
So you could drown in just a few inches of water.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, your rain gardens are bigger and not as deep, like you just said, than a dry pond or a wet pond is going
Right.
to be. And certainly in the temporary construction, stormwater ponds. So we could look at a depth, but if we wanted to require it, if it's going to hold 3 feet of water or more, but then that somebody could still, a little child not being supervised could fall in to a 1 foot pond and drown. So,
Well, I mean, if you want, I mean, there is probably more layers to this than I initially was just thinking stormwater ponds. If you want to defer this, maybe if you have an appetite to discuss it to a work session.
I think we should have staff look into it and see what's feasible,
Okay.
certainly from a safety standpoint.
Yeah, so if you just give us direction, we'll be glad
Yeah.
to do the research and bring it back to you at a workshop.
Yeah, the whole thing is a safety issue anyway. You know,
Well, it sounds like it's a hazard. It's happened here. And so, you know, what specific direction would you like? I mean, I'd like, you know, it sounds like our consensus is to look into
Yeah.
requiring it in a feasible, you know, way that's not gonna like get clogged up or cause problems of its own.
I would add aesthetics to it as well. So if it's gonna be around
Sure.
people's
Make it look
homes and
nice.
backyards,
well, that's true.
within reason, it should.
But since it's done some places, we know it can be done.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure other cities probably have ordinances already.
We would want to make sure that the initial stormwater, the water from the storm passes through the fence and gets into the
Right,
pond,
right,
and it's
right,
not diverted. So
Yeah.
that chain link's going to catch some silt and whatnot and grass.
I don't know
So
how that works.
so we'll look into all of that and do that research and bring it
And
back to you.
I think the aesthetics are a part of it too, because you look at some of the commercial ones we have, they are really unsightly. So if we're gonna require fencing, then I think we need to look at the whole picture of it.
I'm sure there's some cities in the country that have done it quite nicely.
It can be done nicely, you're right.
So it sounds like there's consensus from the council that we look into this and bring it to you at a future workshop to,
Yes.
to present to you.
all right. All right, very good.
So that's all we have for that.
Yeah. Let's move to committee reports.
Thank you, Mayor. You've, under committee reports, you've got the draft agendas for your advisory boards. You've got the Tourism Development Authority report from their August 11th meeting, the Board of Adjustment from their August 12th meeting, Parks and Rec Board from their August 18th meeting, the Main Street Advisory Board and Downtown Belmont Development Association draft minutes from their August the 19th meeting, and the main, and that's at the Main Street. So that then brings you to the manager's report. I've got a couple things for information, but also for some direction. Transportation obviously is a huge topic, both planning and what's currently on the ground with traffic flow and signalization. So we've asked staff from the MPO and NCDOT to come to your September the 20th workshop, which will be held Monday the 20th at 4 at City Hall, and give an update on the long-range projects that are in the works and where those stand, but also things like signalization on Wilkinson and maybe South Point Road and some other areas, and just current DOT issues. I'd like to have a more recurring meeting either between the DOT staff and city staff, or DOT staff maybe come back and reporting back to you on some of these issues that we receive concerns about. So that will be the major topic at the September workshop. Also, the MPO is meeting this month, and DOT, for all the reasons we've talked about all year with their funding challenges and whatnot, we do have several projects that are funded in the current plan, but their DOT is requesting that the MPO approve a delay in those. Two of the big ones that will be delayed are the intersection improvements of Park Street and Wilkinson, which was scheduled in just a couple years as part of making sure that Wilkinson can handle the overflow traffic from 85 when 85 is under construction. The improvements to Park Street and Wilkinson are now being pushed out to sometime after 2035. So there will be no help at all for that intersection for the next 15 years. And then also there was a roundabout approved at the intersection of Lower Armstrong Road and South Point Road that was programmed for 2029. That's now been pushed out past the 2035 horizon year.
Yeah.
So really, all we're going to get is the bridge replacement out here at Wilkinson, and the intersection improvements at Wilkinson and Catawba Street, and then 85 widening. That's really about it in Belmont. We routinely ask to widen South Point Road. That's one of the things that you all hear the most about. We hear a lot about. So we submitted that again for spot 6.0. That did not score well enough to be considered in the fiscally constrained metropolitan transportation plan. I'll defer to you on the details on that. But that covers projects through the year 2050. So the widening of South Point Road did not make that cut
To 2050.
to 2050.
Oh,
So that's well, it's just under 30 years from now. We did get cost estimates for that, so you'll have to wait at least 29 more years for help on South Point Road from NCDOT.
Which makes the South Fork Parkway even more critical.
Yes, absolutely.
Huh.
And we currently have the authority to require some off-site transportation improvements through the TIA process for land development projects. That's really going to be the only way we're going to get stuff done.
Make developers pay for it when they come to build.
Yes, exactly.
I repeat that. Make the developers pay for it when they come.
While the General Assembly allows us.
While we still
While
can.
we're allowed.
Yes.
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise, I
There's
guess
no
we just
other
won't
way to
build
get
roads
roads.
anymore.
Yes, exactly. And just wanted to update you, the planning staff are working on amendments to our open space chapter in the land development code, as well as continued discussions with the county on the stormwater and erosion control, sedimentation control
While we're
ordinance.
able to do that.
While we're able to do that, the General Assembly passed a law last week. The governor hasn't, I didn't check today. Did he sign it? Okay. We can get you more information on that, but it limits, I think the big thing, Shelley, is that we can't we can't require individual lot silt fencing if there's an erosion control plan for the overall development. That's the way I read that. Okay. Thank you. But there is a movement to not allow cities to have erosion control ordinances or stormwater ordinances that are more stringent than the state rules. And the state has historically been sort of the floor. And you could go, now the state would be the ceiling, and you can't be more restricted than the state.
You have to wonder what's driving that.
I don't wonder what's driving that. I know what's driving that.
I know, I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
So you just spent a lot of time in the last 2 years updating the tree protection ordinance. There was a House bill that failed, but now that's back in the House budget proposal
Yeah.
to deny, or actually to remove all tree protection ordinances in cities. So this stuff is still out there. We're watching it with the league municipalities, but it's all out there. So just stay tuned and talk to your friends in the General Assembly and Governor's office about our concerns.
I wanted to ask you a question. You had mentioned the open space text amendment. Going through the minutes, something caught my eye to where one of our associate planners want to have one of the Main Street Advisory Board members on the steering committee to update that ordinance. And I was curious as to why, because the open space mainly applies to new developments, our requirements on new development, which are way beyond the purview of the Main Street Board, who has a finite area downtown by statute to where they're involved. So I was just going to ask, what purpose or benefit is it going to be to have someone from the Main Street Board on a steering committee to update an ordinance that doesn't impact them at all?
Thinking back to last month and our approval of the Imperial Lofts, wasn't that in the downtown area? And didn't that involve an open space discussion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just.
Yeah.
And I believe one of the things that planning staff is looking at is requiring some open space requirements for commercial development, which we currently don't require. So we want to get some opportunities. And Shelley, if you have any more to add on that.
That's correct. So we've been doing a lot of research on open space ordinances, and what we found is there are some cities that promote public art and the mitigation schools when dealing with open space. So we have like the lofts proposed, and they could be all great mixed-use development. They could meet all of their open space on site to negotiate with them an opportunity to include some public art in the development of the plaza and so forth as a means to help meet an open
they evaluate commercial development and redevelopment in our downtown, and they're also trying to promote public art. So we thought it'd be great to have their input in the development of an ordinance to see if that's a feasible option for the city.
Okay. That's all, it just didn't seem to fit. There was really, I didn't see any explanation beyond wanting to place a member there. But okay,
Yes, and so Peyton Ratchford is the planner charged with that, and she's going to the various advisory boards to get input. I know she went to Parks and Rec Board and got some input from our volunteers as well. So just, we are working on those that you've asked us to. I also want to give you an update on the North Belmont Water Booster Pump Station. This project was really kicked off with the Dixon Village neighborhood in North Belmont. We are nearing completion with the design that HDR is doing. Should get a permitting in September and bidding in October. Also, Jerry and I met with the property owner where we want to locate it. They were very good to work with, very supportive of selling us. It's a small piece of their property. We've got it surveyed to create a lot for us, and then I've requested an appraisal so we can have a fair market value and have something to negotiate. So we hope to have that to you soon to purchase the property. With everything else, supply chain interruptions and the contractor availability, we're hoping to have this finished by the end of June. But we have been in contact with Habitat for Humanity on how many houses they could build if they're ahead of where we are with this water pressure. So we are working on Authorizing the project. When we have those, when we get the bids in, we'll bring them to you to vote on the project. But we are doing what we need to do to get that moving so that we'll have adequate water pressure, not only for Dixon Village, but for the North Belmont community.
Yeah.
So I mentioned the budget, and we've talked about the skateboard park a little bit tonight. I think we talked about this at last month's meeting, but the State House through Representative Baumgartner has put in $150,000 for the skateboard park. That's not in the Senate budget, it's just the House budget. So the House and the Senate passed different budgets, and now they're negotiating on an overall budget. So that money still has to make it through the negotiated budget with the Senate. It still has to be signed by the governor. The governor hasn't signed a budget in several years now. So that money, it's good that it's in there, but it doesn't mean it's going to make it out of the budget process. So we're following that. But assuming that money survives the state budget and signed into law, then I need direction from the council whether that's $150,000 added to the overall project budget of, I think it's $265,000, or if that's going to supplant $150,000 of city money that we could then use on something else. So that's, you don't have to decide that tonight, but we'll need to figure that out soon. And then also, if it's in addition, then there are features at the skateboard park that we can add. We can increase the footprint of it. We already are finalizing the detailed engineering plan to submit to Gaston County for the building permit so that we can get started on construction this fall. I think hopefully by October, November with Spawn Ranch. So if we wanted to add to the scope of the project, we may need to slow that part down, but I don't want to slow it down because there's urgency on getting it done. And I don't want to slow it down hoping that the state's going to take, will approve this through the end of the process. We can always add to the park later. We can build what you've already approved and add to it if that's the desire of the council. So we just need some direction from you on that. And I would sort of just hit you with it so we can talk about that later, because I don't think there's going to be resolution to the budget issues anytime soon. From what I heard from the Senate, it's probably going to be October before they may have something, and that's just the House and the Senate. Also, I presented this to you in an email report over the last maybe 2 weeks, but you haven't had a chance to talk about it. I was asked to look at the opportunity to purchase the vacant lot at the corner of Bryant and McLeod Streets for the purpose of building public parking. The purchase price from the property owner is $415,000. It's about a quarter acre. Jerry looked at what we could get for parking on there. We could get 15 parking spaces based on the parking lot that we did in 2017, the cost estimates would be about $155,000, so it would be about $570,000 minimum, assuming that the costs haven't risen in the last 4 years for parking lot construction. But property purchase and construction would be $570,000. So I just wanted to get, before I give a hard yes or no to the property owner so that he can either sell it to us or move on, I wanted to get your take on that, get direction from the council.
A hard no from me.
Yeah, $1 million an acre seems a bit rich. I mean, I know we're a hot market, but we're not New York. So.
Well, we need more parking downtown that we can control, that is not leased, because the lease lots will go away. But the cost per parking spot is way out of line.
It is, yeah.
And this was about $38,000 per space, which is comparable to what parking decks cost per space.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
So is it safe for me to just to respectfully decline the offer?
Yeah.
I was just, yeah, I agree, but what is a parking space worth in downtown Belmont?
I don't know.
I don't think it's as ridiculous.
If you're
As
trying
you-
to
if
find
you
one,
just-
a ton.
$38,000 parking space. I mean, you might have people willing to spend that in a few years.
Yeah.
Parking space. I don't think it's as ridiculous, but I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, thank you. We've already handled Mr. Willis's utility refund. And then also, this is sort of late-breaking news for the Tourism Authority. There are two representatives from the Hampton Inn on the Tourism Authority. They have both left the Hampton Inn and therefore will no longer be on the Tourism Authority. That leaves us with just Susan Moss from the Hilton Home to Suites as the hotel representative. So you will need to appoint another hotel representative. My understanding is that Brandon Keller, who was the general manager and was on the board previously, is going to be back at the Hampton Inn. So we've reached out to him to ask him to apply. So hopefully he can get on that board. We're starting to see more frequent turnover in hotel employees serving on that board. So we may want to consider having a seat for the Hampton and a seat for the Hilton, and it just be the general manager or his or her designee. So when we have turnover, we don't have vacancies that if we follow your process, have to apply, we have to schedule the interviews and appoint.
Yeah, I mean, if the point is just to appoint the GM, yeah. I mean,
Okay,
That'll
so
probably stabilize it.
yes.
Agreed.
So I just want to let you know, so we'll be under our statutory threshold briefly until, I wasn't going to announce that.
Okay.
And just think, we were worried about putting too many people on the board just a few months ago.
Yes. But this would, having a designated Hampton person, and in this case it'd be Brandon, would get you back into compliance with the statute.
Right.
But also would be consistent with what we
Well, we have
discussed.
to have those folks.
Right.
I mean, we may be presented with an opportunity in the future to shrink the board.
But you definitely want to have those hotel
Yeah.
people to stay in compliance. So just giving you that as information. And then Chief Hawkins, you're still back there. Could you give us an update on school traffic and all the fun that we've had in the last 2 weeks?
I can make it real short.
Yes.
Just be patient. Just be patient.
There's traffic.
So I'm gonna do the best I can with this. Central, I'll start with it. It's the easy one. We do have additional students there, but it seems to be flowing fairly smoothly. Now that we're into the second week. So that one's not really an issue to us. Then I will move on to Page. We had a lot of issues there with motorists that are aggravated that the traffic stops, they're moving around, and then, obviously we are trying to get people to be safe and not move around in vehicles. So try to find a solution. Went to the school. They agreed that we would try a new pattern to funnel the school, the traffic around the school. That was an epic fail. And this is the reason why. We found out that the school system is no different than the rest of America. Right? They have a shortage of bus drivers. So we have 350 students and only 51 of them ride the bus. So the rest of them are schools don't have the staff nor the money to pay the teachers to be out there earlier or later to help us to keep the traffic moving. So everyone has problems, and the Belmont Police Department gets to deal with it. So that's the reality of it. So right now, we're back to the other, the principal moved us back to the regular pattern that was last year. We went in last week and he informed us of that. So it's back to its old pattern, and we're trying to figure it out and do the best we can with it. The issues we have there and at South Point Belmont is some issues that's really out of our control, but we're trying to deal with it. And that's the population, the footprint, and the infrastructure. I can only do so much with it. I can push the cars into each other, we can push it, but we still have too many cars at one time. And so I have some recommendations, but people don't like to hear them, is that maybe people need to alter times of when they go back and forth. But that's another conversation. I know a lot of people don't hear that, but right now, I'm not sounding like David Downer, but that's your issue. We have too many cars at one time. And we're getting them there as fast as we can, but we as the police department are taking the brunt of this. And we didn't create this problem.
Yeah.
Nor do we have, I mean, we can be out there, people were saying, well, the officers are not directing traffic. Well, all we're doing is directing them into each other. I mean, we're pushing cars into each other, which is not solving the problem. So we can direct traffic all we need to, but we're pushing them into each other because they haven't looked at it. We think we have that issue resolved at South Point and Belmont Middle School. It is flowing. People are saying, well, they're not going very fast. Well, movement is what we're after.
Right.
You know, we want to keep them moving. We're going to be delayed. School traffic across America. This is not just Belmont. School traffic everywhere is delayed.
Yeah.
And so we just ask people to be patient. You don't mind waiting 30 minutes to get into your favorite sporting event, so please be patient to get your kids to school. I know that might sound harsh, but that's where we're at right now. We're going to have to figure this out, but we're going to have to do it together, pointing fingers and everything. I don't have 5 officers put out school traffic every morning at 3 different locations. I don't have them. So I don't think the city council wants to approve the positions to pay for that for school traffic. So what I want to get across is right now, Paige is, we're doing the best we can. We're trying to figure out a way to, move the traffic around, but it's just going to be stopped because, again, we obviously have around 300 parents that are dropping their kids off and picking them back up. And that's a very small road, and, they have the school system has some acres behind there to maybe, do a cut through back to Parkdale. I don't foresee that happening. But it is an option. So we're trying to get them to alter school times or bring the kids in. I know that's not always ideal. So that's the Page part, and we've seen tremendous improvements at South Point. In about 20, 22 minutes max, we pretty much got it clicked.
Good.
So we're feeling good about that.
Yes.
And I have probably the best person on that job. I have a 20-year veteran state trooper retired that handled Charlotte Motor Speedway traffic. So somebody asked me today, so well, who's looking at this? I said, probably somebody way more qualified than you. And he's went out there and got it cleared out in about 19 or 22 minutes. So
He's done a motor speedway.
he's done a good,
experience.
or Lowe's Motor Speedway, that's what it is. So that's moving, and it's not going to be perfect. That's the message, the real message I want to give you is it's not going to be perfect. And if I sound a little frustrated, if you think of the calls that I have in the last 2 weeks over something that's totally out of my control, it's not fun.
Yeah.
So I'm just asking everyone again to be patient. We're doing the best we can with what we have, but we have the middle school, we have the high school, we have the Chick-fil-A, Harris Theater, developments, and we have the same 2-lane road that we had 100 years ago.
Which might get upgraded by 2050.
Maybe.
Well,
Yeah, maybe, if we're lucky.
Well, the problem is, and from serving on the Transportation Advisory Committee for years, it only, for those certain amount of time, for that 30 minutes or an hour, so that doesn't, always meet the threshold there that they're looking for. So, I just, we're going to have to figure out, time schedules, see if people can adjust, but
Yeah.
different schools. But right now, Page is probably one that's most up there. I think, and Martha, you deal with South Point every day, so have you seen improvement?
I'm cutting through, so, yeah.
Well,
So I don't
I
do
think
that.
there was some issues,
The,
you know.
the staff at South Point has informed me that they would like to see the lights synchronized, so Adrian and I talked about at least having DOT look at that to see if we have the best option before they meet with us on the 20th. And that's about as much as we can do, at least ask them to look at that piece of it.
We're meeting with them and you know, with the lights and everything, but we've been actually, during the school time, they've got it worked out where now if they do synchronize them and change them, it could mess us up. So,
Uh-oh.
but I'm leaving there. So I'm telling you, it is a fluid process here. We're trying to get through it, but I think it's much better on two of the schools than it was. Page is just agree with that. So that's out of our control. I mean, we can make recommendations. We can try. I feel like, you know, we could have had a little more time to work out the kinks in it. That was out of my control.
Sounds like the cut through would be a good option.
I think it would be a wonderful option. Now, I don't know the topography. I don't know
either.
what all it would take to get it back there, but I do know that they have land up there.
We can certainly ask our school board member to look into that for us.
But
Thanks.
we asked the citizens, council, anyone who's open to suggestions. We would definitely, we don't have all the answers, but we are definitely trying to work on it and make it better. And like I said, I've gotten a lot of calls that there's been improvement and that things around South Point and Belmont Middle actually are better. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I can answer any questions, and hopefully I'll have some good answers.
Thanks, Chief. Any questions for Chief? Good. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all that I have for the manager's report and
Right.
the police chief's.
Other
report.
business, we'll start out with Mark Seelinger.
Before we go into other business, I'd like to ask a point of order or a point of process. Is there a way, under Robert's rules, I think there is, but you'll know, to reopen a question that we've already voted on or debated?
The majority,
Somebody in the,
majority.
Okay, because and there may be no appetite for this, but I had on the question of the dog park. I mean, I had intended on offering an alternative motion, but I caught myself scribbling, and we voted beforehand because, you know, I know they have invested money and time in this, and I know we turned down the site plan. I mean, my preference would have been to defer action on it until we had completed the Park and Rec building and could get a handle on what the requirements might be for parking. You know, not eliminate the site or not approve the plan, but just defer action on it. But again, that was my fault. I started looking at some notes and writing, and I failed to offer that alternate motion. So, I mean, again, if there's no appetite for it, there's no point in it, but.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Who is in the majority?
you and Mark and Martha.
Okay.
So if one, so what would they have to do?
Well, I'm trying to think about that.
It has to be at the same meeting, right?
Yeah.
Which it is.
You can
Meeting adjourned.
make, yeah.
And I'm a member of the.
And I didn't bring my rules.
What I don't know is, since the motion failed, if a member of the majority group voted against it, vote reopen.
I feel like we included something about a motion to reconsider. I don't.
So, if someone of the three wants to file for a motion to reconsider, and it's voted on by majority to reconsider, not for a second.
So I don't have a problem with that either, because that in effect is what we were discussing as far as what the three of us, I think, were not totally nixing it, more looking at wait and see attitude.
Yeah.
I thought the issue was location, not parking. But
Well, the two go hand in hand with me. I mean, if there's no, if after we have had several events and see that there is no additional parking required, then you look at it differently. So I mean, to me, it is a location question somewhat, if that makes sense.
I gather that's an indefinite term for that, since you don't even know for sure that the recreation building's gonna be constructed, and then if it is, then what time period after that are that you may be talking what?
Because it's a 18-month construction period.
3 years or so maybe, before you reconsider.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to put that out there as an option. Again, that's my fault for being distracted. I didn't mean to offer that at that time, but I suspected there was a mechanism to redress it.
yeah. Well, you want to,
How, do we have to, did you say we have to adjourn and then?
No, we
It has to
can
be
adjourn.
Before we adjourn.
Yeah. The one time.
can we reconsider parks as far as,
Yeah.
Do we can we just leave it open-ended since we do not have a finite date? Or can we just word it until such time as it can be determined whether additional parking would be required?
If the majority of the board wants to go with that, that's fine. That's a real vague ruling. The indefinite, do you want to go with that
Well, I mean,
level of indefiniteness? I mean,
I don't know if you guys have any,
I think that hurts the
Different-
project more than anything, giving them.
we're
false
voting on the
hope.
site plan anyway, so
Was that?
we're voting on the site plan anyway.
Or not, well, yeah. I mean, it might give them false hope.
okay, well, I'm saying I just bringing that up because I know they've got some time and money invested. I didn't want to nix it completely. Just defer it until we've got a clear picture handle. I mean, even though we've done a study on it, who knows what the future will bring with parking requirements. But I mean, again, if there's no appetite or the language is too vague and Ryan, if you feel it's inappropriate to them or affect them adversely, I don't want to do any more damage or.
I mean, if I was working on a project, I wouldn't want to be given an indefinite timeline of maybe in 3 or 4 years we can reconsider this site plan, because I mean, it's a long time.
That's true.
So I'm not involved with the project, and I won't be making any decisions on it. So but I'm just thinking as somebody who's raised money and stuff somebody told me, hey, there's a chance we might reconsider this in 3 years. I wouldn't do another thing. That'd be me.
What do you think, Parks? What do we need to do?
If somebody wants to offer a motion, they can from the majority. If not, we move on.
Okay, anybody want to offer a motion?
Well, I mean, I'd like to tighten up that language, but I'm not exactly, I didn't realize we're looking at a 3-year timeline. So I mean, I don't know how to, the key is the language, the period would seem to be the
That's a
key.
good location.
Yeah, I don't think you can, your idea about until you have clear understanding and things like that, that's real vague language. And it doesn't give any kind of definite timeline. So, it might be a topic for future discussion. You turn down the site plan tonight, that doesn't mean you couldn't consider another one or reconsider it at a future date.
Okay.
I'd rather do that than sort of forge ahead blindly and not know the exact repercussions of what we're doing.
Okay. I mean, that's fine. I just
Yeah.
wanted to.
So I
bring that up
understand the
as an option.
sentiment. But,
Because it's not like a land use decision where we're like statutorily barred from considering it again. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you for indulging that thought.
We want to make a motion?
No,
No.
we're
No.
going to move on.
Push it on, okay.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, let's do our other business. Mark? you first.
The only thing I had was, I noted the tourism board is going to be discussing that marketing position we had talked about a few months ago, I think at their next meeting. I know we kind of set a deadline by the end of the year, kind of figuring out what we're going to do with that. So I thought it might be a good idea to check in with them after they talk since we're about halfway through, halfway through the 6 months that we gave ourselves to figure this out. That was it.
Okay, Martha?
A couple of things. I had alerted Shelley because the lights going down Stowe Road, the first section of the rental units, those are not functioning, and we have way too many people walking. So she's looking into it, but I think we need to really push them because that's not appropriate. And also, I did take note, I know we have it on our punch list for the Finial townhouses, but I actually drove there and saw somebody trying to walk their dog through the rubble, and so we need to push that as well. So those are my two items.
I have nothing. Jim, excuse me.
Yes, several things. I'd be curious to know what happened in Mount Holly with the Belmont Rowing Club request to use their, I guess, former wastewater treatment plant as a site. I don't know what happened with that.
We haven't heard from
Okay.
the rowing center about that.
Well, I'd just be curious
Yes.
to get an update on that. I'd also be interested in an update on the corrective actions that were, as Richard mentioned, being required of Amberley and Tower Crest. And I think it was more severe as to Amberley than it was to Tower Crest, but I think they still had a deadline to take corrective actions, and whether those actions were taken, and if not, what has resulted as because of that. I just wanted to follow up. I know last meeting we talked about, Bill did the update on his research regarding that creek and the easement behind the properties at Catherine Court. And I just wanted to make sure that somebody contacted them and told them of that research, because otherwise, they're probably not going to like what it says, but otherwise we fall back in the trap of, well, we'll take a look at this and get back to you, and then we never get back to them. So I just want to, Bill did the work. I just didn't know whether that's been shared, or I think it should be shared.
I wasn't invited to the meeting, so I don't know who I would give it to, but I'm happy to give that to whomever. Or since you were there, I could give that to you.
That's fine. I mean, Carol Stowe used to be on our planning and zoning board. That seems to be the point person. So that's fine.
Do you still have that report, or I can email that to you if you want to give it out to the folks that.
That's fine. Yeah, if you would, I'll print it out.
Let's see, and we've talked, or I've mentioned to you, I know, we've had some complaints about an odor coming from the pump house from the lift station at the South Shore development, and just to take a look at that and see what can be done about that. And amendments to the utility billing policy based on what we've talked about today. And then just again, community meetings going forward, if we could get some more of those scheduled.
I've asked Jamie to schedule those, and I think we were trying to get.
Working on 3 right now. We're doing Eagle Park and Reflection Point. So those 3 will be between now and the end of the year. That's kind of what we're targeting. We might get in then for like someone if we get a space. Is the question. So
Okay.
that's kind of where we're targeting right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know if we touched on this or not, but I think we need to, if plans are in place to do this, that's fine, but during our workshop, look at the projects we may want to fund with this $4 million from, the American Recovery Act or COVID Recovery Act? Because the language is fairly broad, but then again, it's also kind of restrictive on where we can put it. I know water and sewer issues qualify, and we've got a lot of needs in that area. So that's one thing. We bring our CIP into it and take a look at what qualifies and go ahead and start knocking some things off that list. Since we're going to be in here conducting our city council meetings, I guess, for some time or forever, I wondered if we could bring the city seal, which sat behind the mayor before, and maybe bring it here, to have it in this chamber. I'd like to thank Ryan for the work he did on that park and rec plan. I bet he's wishing he didn't put his hand up at that
You know
retreat. It's too late now. And Martha and Mark, thanks for approaching Dana Bumgardner, our representative, to get him to add that money. I know I think you guys went in with an initial request of 50, and he somehow was able to get 150. So
We hope.
that's really,
Yeah, he was great to work with.
yeah. That was very proactive. I mean, I appreciate that out of the
Yeah.
box thinking on that. Miss Yeager for the work she had done. Listening to this, though, made me think that we also had a discussion around development, increasing our fines for them violating their soil erosion plan, for violating the tree save ordinance, because the tree save ordinance, if I recall correctly, the fine is $50,000. Now, I think Morgan's Branch was our first example of that. $50,000 is nothing to these guys. If I can cut those trees down and pop in 3, 4, 5 more houses, I cut that deal all day long and I write that check because I'm selling those houses for $400,000 or $500,000. I think we need to beef up our fines, but at the end of the day, that's a cost of doing business, and they will pass that down to whoever is buying homes there. So I think we need to increase our fines, but I also think we might need to take a look at something that will slow or stop work if they violated one of these. Because the one thing, I mean, they can write a check. They've got access to plenty of money. But if you stop issuing permits or issue a work stop order on the site for a predetermined period, 30 days, 60 days, I mean, that is what's going to really get their attention and bring everybody into line to abide. Because, again, if it's me, I write that check all day long. I violate and I write the check. But you stop my work, and I may lose my subcontractors. They may move on to other jobs. And then I've got to, just like they have to mobilize for paving our streets, they're then in a position, I got to remobilize my teams. My teams have moved on. That might be something we want to look at. Adrian, I mean, as far as the MPO goes, you're exactly right. I mean, all projects are fiscally constrained now, even the approved projects. There was an audit of the DOT online. I think it's available online, but we discussed it some at the MPO. And a lot of this, part of the money shortage is just poor planning, poor costing, poor modeling for costing, overspending on projects. So we're going to be very limited on road projects going forward. And I know I brought this up before, but now it's put a really fine point on the lack of funds, because they're forecasting 2050 for that traffic circle at Upper Armstrong, and that's a dire need. I don't know that we could afford to do that as a municipality, but we may want to look at a funding mechanism or some way to get some of these smaller projects done, because the pressure on the road system continues to increase, and we are not going to get much help from Raleigh, the DOT, the MPO, because the money's not available. So I don't know if that's a discussion we want to have, because any relief in the flow of traffic is better than no relief. So that's what I have.
All right. Ron?
It seems like we're having some positive direction with the Belmont Trolley Incorporated. I know you're all aware that Charlotte Trolley has voted to let us take over their 2 trolley cars to come out this way. Also, I know there's been some real serious discussions with some very, very large donors who are excited about the project. So hopefully that will continue to move well now and into the future. I think it makes a pretty significant impact. Also, I was excited to see that Rob Presley bought the old bank building. Rob does a good job of fixing things up. I don't know if you've been inside of 100 North Main, the white building on Main Street, but it's Class A office space. It's absolutely beautiful. I think there's 3 national tenants inside of there. So he's been doing a good job as far as trying to fix up these buildings and bring in some large corporate tenants. And so that was good to hear as well. And so I just wanted to mention that as we're moving forward with our downtown planning. But was there something else I had?
Thank you.
I think that's all.
Okay. All right. Do we have a motion to go into closed session?
I will make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318.11 subsection 6 to include the Human Resources Director. Is that correct? Okay, that would be the motion.
I will be back.
I'll second.
Okay, second. Well, all right. all
They're
in-
not excused yet.
Right. But we go into,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, so we're in closed session. All right. Yeah, wait for Ryan to get back.
Right, Ryan was not excused.